Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel's Scientist to God, Spider-Gwen is crazy over me. Chapter 1. Osborne Industrial Building. Yi-Hai leaned against the chair, sitting in a tight position, looking forward, and there was a table in front of him, and behind the table was an interviewer. The interviewer was a middle-aged man with a formidable face and a white coat. His striking right was his right arm empty. This person is the lizard doctor Kurt Connor in The Amazing Spider-Man. Today is the last interview of Yi-Hai. If he can satisfy Dr. Connor, he can enter the Osborne industry and become Dr. Connor's assistant. Yi-Hai, who crossed the Marvel Universe a month ago and became a graduate of Harvard University's major in biological sciences. The boy he traversed was a 20-year-old Chinese, also named Yi-Hai. Somewhat similar. This made him believe that it was by no means an accident to cross himself. There must be something that would allow him to have such an incredible trip to another world. You are Yi-Hai, Dr. Connor said with Yi-Hai's resume in hand. The top students in life sciences at Harvard University in the United States. I have read your materials and several of your papers. You have some knowledge about gene fusion. Interesting idea, that's why you can interview me here. Quote, thank you Dr. Connor for your appreciation. I have read many of your papers and books. I am very interested in your idea of incorporating animal genes into the human body. MTLnovel.com, smiled Yi-Hai Wei, trying to make his expression look as good as possible, polite and natural. Although human beings have intelligent minds, they are physically weak, but if they can extract the expertise of animal genes and integrate them into humans, they will bring a change to humans and make them more perfect. Of course, it can also solve many human regrets, such as Dr. Connor your. Quote. Yi-Hai looked at Dr. Connor's right arm and stopped. Dr. Connor did not care about Yi-Hai's concern about his disabled right arm, but showed an interested look, saying, oh. What animal genes do you think my arm is more suitable for repair? Lizard, Yi-Hai said without hesitation. Dr. Connor hesitated for a moment. This view coincided with him. This was the conclusion he had reached through complex calculations and experiments, and it had just been concluded that this young man could not steal this information from the inside. Then there is only one possibility. This young man knows animal genes well and has a smart and flexible mind. Thinking of this, Dr. Connor has basically like the young people in front of him. Being able to break through several levels in the end, and interviewing him at the end, the professional knowledge will not be a problem at all. Dr. Connor depends on whether the interviewer has a genius-like idea. Yi-Hai can speak a lizard, which can show that his mind is flexible. Next, Dr. Connor asked a few more experimental questions, none of which were very professional. They were all tests of one's inspiration and perception. Fortunately, the body that Yi-Hai traversed was indeed a hegemon. In addition, his own mind can also pass the test of Dr. Connor one by one. At last Dr. Connor stood up, stretched out his left hand and said, congratulations, boy, I am very optimistic about you, so you have been accepted. Ding. The host was affirmed by a famous scientist, entered the Osborne Enterprise, passed the test of the system, and now the big scientist system is officially launched. As this golden finger, Yi-Hai's face exulted. It turned out that I also had cheat fingers, and I was still a big scientist system, which sounded to have something to do with my profession. Dr. Connor laughed. Okay, Yi, I know you're happy, but I'm going to interview a few more people. You can report to the personnel department now. Yi-Hai returned to God, and nodded with a smile. Thank you, Dr. Connor, I'm leaving now, bye. Bye, Yi, I hope we can cooperate happily. Dr. Connor waved and sat down again. After leaving the interview room, Yi-Hai walked up the corridor, and heard the sound of the system again. Ding, the big scientist system is finished. Hello host, the system is sincere to serve you. System, did you let me cross this Marvel world? Yi-Hai asked carefully, what do you have? The host was selected by this system and became a spatiotemporal immigrant. As for what this system exists, the host is now too low in level and has insufficient permissions. The sound of the system is crisp and nice, but it looks mechanically cold. It seems to be an intelligent life, but it has a high IQ. Then what did you take me to this world for me to do? Yi-Hai asked, quite worried. The host completes the task and makes the host a powerful scientist. Yi-Hai and the system walked along the corridor while chatting, then took the elevator downstairs and entered the Osborne personnel department. After completing some procedures, the personnel manager asked him to come here to work for 2 days. 2 days later, Yi-hai came to work at the Osborne Industrial Building, where he became an assistant to Dr. Connor. "Yi, come here," Dr. Connor called to Yi-hai, pointing to a girl beside him. "This beautiful girl is named Gwen Stacy, who is also one of my assistants, but she is also a high school student, usually works with me during vacations. So, Yi, your job is to take over her job." Quote. "Okay, Dr. Connor." Yi-hai was a little disappointed. How much professional ability a high school student can have, it seems that the work he does is probably irrelevant. Dr. Connor laughed. "Yi, don't underestimate Gwen. Gwen is a talented woman with brilliant talents and unique insights into biology. She helped me solve difficult research problems." Oh, Yi-hai immediately stared at the girl. It seems that the heroine in the original book is truly extraordinary. He vaguely remembers that Gwen has great authority in the laboratory in the original book and should be valued by Dr. Connor. People, otherwise. Yi-hai Shen, shot and smiled. "Miss Stacy, please advise me in the future." Gwen is blonde like the original, wearing a women's trench coat, but hard to hide the exquisite curves. In addition to the face is a little childish, tender, the others are very mature. Gwen shook hands with Yi-hai and laughed in a clear voice. "Listen to Dr. Connor, do it." The tone of an old employee made Yi-hai dumbfounded, and Dr. Connor laughed. "Well, you two already know each other. Gwen, take Yi-hai to get familiar with the environment and work." "Okay, Dr. Connor." After Dr. Connor turned away, Gwen looked at Yi-hai and asked, "Yi, are you Japanese?" Yi-hai said unhappily, "No, I am Chinese, but I am Chinese." Gwen apologized. "It seems that the rumor that you Chinese do not like Japanese is true. Sorry, I'll take you to see the experimental products." Gwen took Yi-hai and walked quickly. "Very popular. Looks like a nerd, child girl. Drive Connor is a leading scientist in the herpetology community. He is obsessed with repairing his right arm and believes that fusion of animal genes can restore him. But to do this, he needs to complete many steps, so he built a tree of life." Gwen pointed to a virtual vision. "This is the tree of life for our Osborne industry." Presenting at this moment is a 3-dimensional virtual scene, which is a very complicated tree, and the fingers of the tree are linked to different spiders. The spider kept walking, as if living. Yi-hai looked at the scene in front of him in amazement. In his study of the virtual imaging technology of the Earth of this world has already been used in high-end scientific research. "I'll take you to see the bioreactor." Okay. After visiting some of Osborne's facilities, Gwen began to introduce his work. Yi-hai's job was to check the data of the test cells at the time of cell fusion. The data is very tedious and complex, and you must have solid expertise and sufficient patience to be competent. In addition to these, you must have enough inspiration to complete the data. Yi-hai accepts the memories of her predecessor and has solid professional knowledge, but when it comes to inspiration and understanding, she is far less than the girl next to her. Gwen also noticed Yi-hai strangely, saying, "What's wrong with you? These are the basic things. If you are not competent, you must let Dr. Connor down." Actually letting a girl look down, Yi-hai couldn't help but have a headache, remembering that he had 100 scientific values in the system. He said in his heart, "The system uses 10 scientific values to open the secondary brain domain." Yes, ding, open the secondary brain domain, consume 10 scientific values, and the host has 90 scientific values. In a moment, the nerve endings of the brain were stimulated, the thinking was many times faster, and the scenes in his eyes became different. It seemed that the surroundings were much brighter. Yi-hai could see a lot of details that he would not pay attention to before. He knew his brain it is turned on for 20%, and this state can be maintained for 24 hours. There are 10 levels of brain domains that the system can open, from 1 to 10, the first brain domain is turned on 10%, the second brain domain is turned on 20%. The 9th brain domain is turned on 90%, and the 10 brain is turned on. The domain is 100% on. The scientific value is needed to open the brain area. The scientific value is 1 point for 24 hours of consumption for the first level brain area, 10 points for the second level brain area, and 100 points for the third to third level brain areas, and so on. Scientific values are astronomical. The secondary brain domain opened by Yi-hai is 20% activated. What is the concept of 20% brain domain, and the development of the most intelligent human brain domain on the Earth is less than 5%, which shows his fear of thinking ability now. Now Yihai feels like he has never forgotten his memory. His thinking ability is like a supercomputer. The complicated test data and formulas in the computer are like the elementary school level in his eyes. Stop the calculations and get different results. He kept flipping through the computer screen. Only a glance was able to solve a page of data, and in the end it turned faster and faster. Gwen's work that could take a week to complete, he even completed it in more than 10 minutes. What did you say? You're done. I heard that Yihai has finished the data collation, and Gwen's face is dark. This guy thinks who he is. He is so perfunctory. He just flipped so fast. The relationship is for fun. Yihai smiled. Miss Stacy, I am very good at organizing data. This is my specialty. You don't need to be jealous. When did I get jealous? Gwen turned black. You guys don't look like makeup. I don't believe you can be so much faster than me. You don't believe it, just try me. Yihai was confident. Of course. Gwen took a look at this guy who likes to play hard, and deliberately made Yihai ugly. He deliberately worked out some very complicated data and equation formulas. As a result, Yihai answered the question without stagnation, disadvantages, and finally began to optimize to get better data and equations. This. Gwen looked at Yihai as if he was looking at a monster, and came over a long time before he said, Mr. Yi, you are really strong, and I seem to be unemployed. Unemployment. Yihai laughed abruptly, and did not expect that this old-fashioned girl would also make jokes. As a powerful assistant to Dr. Connor found that Yihai is better than her and won't make her jobless. This studio can do a lot. Miss Stacy, do I need to send you unemployment benefits? Yihai joked. Gwen shrugged indifferently. If you have this ability, I wouldn't mind to sip on you. Do you want me to treat you? No problem, I'd like to invite beautiful girls to dinner, I'll be happy. Yihai looked at Gwen's eyes with a smile. The sapphire eyes were as deep as a pool of water, and full of some mystery, which attracted Yihai to explore. He has some interest in this beautiful babe. Do you want to pursue me? Gwen smiled slightly, very sensitively, and pointed out Yihai's intentions. Sapphire's eyes turned, and said, I can give you a chance, seriously, I treat you very curious. The Westerner was straightforward and generous. Out of Yihai's expectation, he did not expect the other party to agree so quickly, making him a bit uncomfortable, and some strange thoughts came to his mind. Perhaps this Western girl has talked many times fall in love, also known as black fungus. No problem, I will work hard, Yihai said. You have such a brilliant talent and you need to immediately inform Dr. Connor and let him know. Gwen opened the internal connector and explained to Dr. Connor the situation of Yihai. Dr. Connor quickly came over. He also tested Yihai again, and found that as Gwen said, he was instantly impressed and pleasantly surprised. Dr. Connor rejoices. Yi, I really didn't expect you to be so talented. I think it is too talented for you to organize your information. Would you like to study the cross-species gene course with me, would you? Dr. Connor looked at Yihai hopefully. Some could not wait. Yihai naturally agreed immediately. No problem, Dr. Connor. Ding. The host got the support of the famous scientist Dr. Connor and entered the core experiment. The system rewards 100 scientific values. Hearing the sound of the system, Yihai was really surprised and asked quickly, System, what are the methods to get scientific value? There are many, mainly 1, the host completes the task of the system release, 2, has made scientific achievements, and 3, the reputation of the host has increased, such as now being recognized by famous scientists. Reputation. Yihai groaned slightly. If I publish a paper in a famous scientific journal, can I still get scientific value? Yes, the system rewards scientific value based on the influence and depth of the paper. Yihai is thinking very fast now, and these dialogues with the system seemed to have a lot of languages. In fact, neither of them spent a second. Gwen was slightly jealous of Yihai's sudden attention from Dr. Connor. This man, who was a few years younger than himself, even blasted her on IQ, which made her arrogant and clever. Full of curiosity, or a feeling of admiration in her heart, just that she hadn't even noticed it. We have protein structure, ribosomal DNA, chromatographic analysis, and genetic testing. That's the X-ray imager, the only one in the world. Dr. Connor led Yi-Hai through the numerous levels and came to the core laboratory. While walking, he introduced Yi-Hai's laboratory equipment. Human line spectrum identifier. Yi-Hai pointed to a device. I've seen this thing. Canary installation. Dr. Connor glanced and introduced. The principle is very simple. Just load an antigen on it, and the reaction cloud it creates can cover the surrounding area, or even the entire city. In theory, it can be cured in one afternoon in the entire city. Quote. Very good equipment. Yi-Hai glanced, pretending to be careless, but someone used it on the other side, and loaded a certain toxic substance in this machine, and the toxic substance enveloped the entire city, and that was a disaster for the city. Dr. Connor laughed. Don't worry, the startup core device of this device is strictly kept, except for a limited number of people who have the right to use it, so your concerns are minimal. Yi-Hai secretly rolled her eyes and groaned in her heart. I am most worried about you. In Ultimate Spider-Man, Dr. Connor uses this device to send out the lizard virus, covering the entire city, almost turning a person in a city into a lizard. Seeing this scourge, Yi-Hai was very worried, but was totally powerless with his current ability. The two stood in front of a three-dimensional virtual platform, where a lizard kept on wriggling, and around it were constantly emerging cytokines. Dr. Connor introduced his finger while moving the platform, and said, the platform you see is a supercomputer. This lizard is a virtual model simulated by this supercomputer. It is a model made with perfect data. It's exactly the same as a living lizard. The supercomputer can transplant the data of this lizard model to test subjects, such as these mice, but we encountered difficulties. None of these white mice were alive after transplanting the lizard gene. Their decay rate algorithm is not perfect. Quote. Ding. Trigger the task. Complete the transformation rate algorithm within 3 days. The task successfully rewards 1000 scientific values, and the task failure deducts 500 scientific values. Hearing the sound of the system, Yi-Hai quickly said, Doctor, although I don't know much about your experiment, but I'd like to assist you to make a force. Can I look at your equation of transformation rate? Dr. Connor looked at Yi-Hai through his glasses and never spoke. Yi-Hai was very nervous. He knew that this equation was the core of Dr. Connor's research and was the result of his research for more than a decade. Newcomer, he would definitely hesitate. What if it is a spy from another company? It may be that Dr. Connor is too eager to get it, coupled with Yi-Hai's computing power is too shocked. He was silent for a long time, and finally nodded, yes. After Dr. Connor turned on his computer and entered the password, Yi-Hai saw the equation for calculating the rate of change. This equation is not just a small segment as in the original book, but it takes up several megabytes of space and has the tens of thousands of data, and symbols are very complicated. If Yi-Hai saw this equation in the general state, let alone perfect it, it would be difficult to understand. But now it's different. He turned on 20% of the brain. His brain movement was very fast and almost unforgettable. He only spent a few minutes reading the equation, and then in his mind, he continued to split the equation and combination, find the advantages and disadvantages, and constantly improve. At the same time, his 10 fingers hit the keyboard like an elven, and the crackling sound of tapping softly echoed in the laboratory. Words and data appeared constantly on the computer screen, constantly calculating and perfecting. At first, Dr. Connor just tried to make Yi-Hai try first. He did not expect Yi-Hai to enter the state so quickly. He stood behind Yi-Hai and kept looking at the data on the screen. His similarities are somewhat different, and they seem to have different general meanings, but he does not have the quick thinking like Yi-Hai and cannot understand quickly or be ignorant. Gradually, with the increase in data, Dr. Connor saw the signs. It seems that Yi-Hai is advancing to the successful equation. In the end, he didn't bother, but just watched silently. Didn't bother him. This look was all day, and suddenly he heard Yi-Hai's surprise, success. Boom. Dr. Connor's heart pounded, and he said, let me see. Okay. Yi-Hai smiled slightly, suddenly stiffened, feeling that the cervical spine, fingers, and arms were so stinging that she couldn't move her body for a while, and asked quickly, Drive Connor, it's been a few hours. Quote. Connor saw his anomaly and apologized. You see, the sky is dark, it has been more than 10 hours, sorry, Yi, I didn't ask you to eat to stop your inspiration, I'm really sorry. Quote. No wonder my stomach is cooing. This guy is really cruel. For his formula, he worked without food or drink for 10 hours. But this inspiration is really hard to say, maybe I ate it. It's not so smooth after dinner. My brain domain is really abnormal, and I don't feel any abnormality in my body. Quote. Although Yihai complained, he still said, "It's okay, Dr. Connor, you did the right thing. This inspiration is hard to say. Maybe I won't be so smooth after eating. Dr. Connor, look." Yihai moved a bit, body, then slowly stood up. Dr. Connor quickly sat down and looked at the data. Yihai knew that he was not thinking as fast as his own. It took several hours to fully understand, so he went to the restaurant of the Osborne building and had a hearty dinner. After eating and drinking, he grinded for hours in the restaurant before walking slowly back to the studio. At this time, Dr. Connor had read the formula and hugged Yihai fiercely, saying, "Yi, you are really a genius. No, genius is not 1/10 of yours. How your brain grows is not like a human brain at all." Quote. Dr. Connor stared at Yihai with full eyes, completely in a state of enthusiasm. Yihai couldn't help but hesitate in his heart. This metamorphic doctor would not be interested in his brain structure, would he not make himself a mouse? Dr. Connor did not notice Yihai's wild thoughts. He cried, "Let's quickly verify this equation. I have a hunch that we can succeed this time. Just do it." Dr. Connor introduced the equation into a supercomputer. The supercomputer ran fast and began transgenic experiments. This is to introduce the lizard genes into a mouse model using a new equation. Replace protein, eliminate immune response, start genetic transformation, please wait. The voice of the supercomputer machinery said slowly. Yihai both stared nervously at the three-legged mouse on the platform. The equation was successfully calculated and regeneration was complete. Mysterious signs were normal, blood pressure was normal, and amputation was successful. Listening to the success report of the supercomputer and the mouse that had become a complete mouse on the platform, Dr. Connor's face showed an ecstatic look. Great. Ding. The host successfully perfected the transformation rate equation. The task was completed within 3 days and 1,000 scientific points were awarded. At night, Yihai returned home. He was unwilling to waste those 10 points of scientific value and did not go to bed immediately. Instead, he looked at the materials of biological sciences and read the contents of the scientific magazine, Life Science, in recent years. Then he looked at professional books. His reading speed was very fast. It was a book for almost 10 minutes, and it was not a swagger. He had mastered the essence of the content, even better than the author of the book. Look, the Superman-like feeling of woolen yarn and Chinese website made him want to stop, so he kept watching, knowing that the sky was bright, and the 24-hour brain domain opening time was over. Almost instantly, the sight in his eyes returned to normal, and his mind became dull. This state made him very uncomfortable, and he could hardly help but want to open the brain again. At this time, the system reminded, "Host, please note that you have been using the brain domain for 24 hours. Now your brain is overused and very tired. The host can use 10 scientific values to eliminate this excessive weakness, or sleep well." Sleep. Yihai felt very tired now, and wanted to lie down and sleep well. He remembered that Dr. Connor had let him not go to work today, take a good rest at home, and recover, and he said, "No need to spend 10 scientific values, this is too precious. I don't want to waste it." Quote. Talking on the bed next to him, "I closed my eyes and soon went to sleep." The next day, he woke up hungry, feeling extremely empty, and quickly picked up his cell phone to check the time, 6 o'clock in the morning. Fortunately, there is plenty of time, so don't worry about being late. After Yi Heifei washed quickly, he took the materials to work. Came to the Osborne Industrial Building, had breakfast in the restaurant, and started working. Today, Dr. Connor gave him good news. Yesterday they passed a live experiment. A mouse without a right limb repaired the body, and the right limb could be used flexibly. The news is very encouraging, and even the head of the studio, Dr. Lada, is here today. Dr. Lada is a middle-aged man of Indian descent, looking a little serious. He looked at Yihai with a smile, and said, "I heard Dr. Connor said that the transformation rate equation that has plagued our experiments is perfect. You guys are really good job." Quote. After applauding, colleagues in the studio applauded. Gwen looked at Yi-hai admiringly in the crowd and applauded desperately, as if he could not feel the pain. A tall, thin and handsome boy beside her looked curiously at Yi-hai and asked, "Who is he? I have never seen it before." "His name is Yi-hai, who just came the day before yesterday." Gwen laughed. What are you talking about?" The boy widened his eyes and said, "You said he had just arrived the day before yesterday. But I heard Dr. Connor say that he had solved the transmutation rate equation." "Yes, Peter, he just arrived the day before yesterday. It only took him a day to complete the equation of the transmutation rate, which is more than 10 years of effort for those of us." "You say he is not great?" Gwen was excited. Road. Peter saw Gwen's eyes glow with brilliant light, and his heart was a bit bitter, and he couldn't help saying, "Yes, he's great." After Yi-hai and Dr. Lotta talked and laughed, they came over and laughed. "Gwen, who is this gentleman?" "His name is Peter Parker, a classmate of mine, and he's also Dr. Connor's assistant for the time being," Gwen said. Yi-hai looked at him carefully. He basically concluded that Peter in front of him should have become Spider-Man. The thought of Spider-Man's ability raised a desire in his heart. "If only I could get this ability." Dr. Lizard's lizard transformation can only be considered a monster, and Spider-Man is a superhero. Ding. Trigger the mission. Study the mutant genes of Spider-Man, which can perfectly integrate the human body. The mission time is 1 month. The mission success rewards 10,000 scientific values, and the mission failure deducts 1,000 scientific values. Yi-hai immediately stretched out his hand and smiled kindly. "Hello, my name is Yi-hai, you can call me Yi." Seeing his kindness, Peter was flattered and grabbed Yi-hai's hand, saying, "Hello, hello." Yi-hai smiled. "You are also a young man. I like young people because we have a common language. Peter, are you interested in becoming my assistant?" Because of Yi-hai's outstanding contributions, Dr. Rada has just appointed him as an Osborn scientist, and will work with Dr. Connor to study cross-species genetics. He is no longer an assistant to Dr. Connor, but 2 people at the same level, so he now needs to recruit some assistants. Peter hesitated, but Gwen eagerly tried. "Yes, can I be your assistant? It's very pleasing for a beautiful lady to work with me. Gwen, I welcome you to join my group." Yi-hai looked at Gwen's beautiful face, and couldn't help but tremble. "I'm not just pretty." Gwen frowned slightly. She was crushed by Yi-hai on IQ, but she was still unwilling, and she was afraid Yi-hai despised her. "Of course, Gwen, you are both beautiful and talented. You are a talented beauty." Yi-hai praised Gwen, then looked at Peter. "How about, Peter, do you think about it?" "It's my pleasure, sir." The goddess in her heart has joined Yi-hai's group, and Peter naturally has to follow. After greeting Dr. Connor, Peter and Gwen became Yi-hai's assistants. After Yi-hai found a few more people, he temporarily set up a group. Looking at Mao, Xian, Wen, and Net members are very simple and still in their infancy, but Yi-hai doesn't care. In fact, these people are covering people's eyes. The main thing to study the results is to see Yi-hai himself. In the laboratory, Yi-hai beckoned, "Peter, Gwen, come here." Peter and Gwen quickly came over and asked, "Is there anything, Yi?" Yi-hai held 2 syringes in his hand and said with a smile, "Our ultimate goal of our research is for the human body. Today Dr. Connor asked me to prepare the cell fusion between the human body and the lizard blood, so I need some human blood, you guys. Are they willing to contribute to science?" Quote. Gwen complained, "You can buy blood from the hospital, the blood of our girls is very precious." Although Gwen complained, he was not slow, and he had already rolled up his sleeves. Peter's eyes flashed a panic, and he shook his head. "Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm anemia, I can't draw blood." Gwen looked at him scornfully and shouted, "No, Peter, I see that you are full-faced and lively, how can it be anemia? You don't want to bleed, just say, there is no need to lie." "Yeah, Peter, why don't you want to draw blood? Can you tell us? I don't think it's a fuss for a man to bleed a little blood. You don't want to be beaten by a girl." Yi-hai smiled with a smile watching him. Peter hesitated in his heart. Could it be seen by him? No matter what, I wouldn't let my serum appear on his test bench. Then I would have no secrets. "I'm sorry, too, I can't draw blood." Peter shook his head firmly. Yi-hai smiled and said, "It seems that Peter is a bit veiled, and I will not force it." wap.mtlnovel.com Gwen looked at Peter with contempt and unwillingness to draw blood. Maybe Peter really had an uncommon disease. Peter was awkward, a little bitter and kind in his heart. While Yi-Hai was between Peter, he suddenly pressed the button on the console. The two manipulators on the console suddenly reached out, grabbed and caught Peter, and then a pinhole penetrated into Peter's body, but in less than a second, a lot of blood was drawn. "What are you doing?" Peter was furious and wanted to explode, but his low-key personality always made him give up this plan, only glaring at Yi-Hai. "Yi-Hai, what are you doing? Don't hurry to put him down." Gwen looked at him with dissatisfaction. "Don't worry, I just draw a little blood and contribute to the evolution of humanity." Yi-Hai shrugged indifferently. At this moment the robotic arm stretched out, he took down the syringe filled with Peter's blood, and then retracted the syringe into the safe. "Peter, I took your blood, rest assured, I will keep you secret if you have any secrets." Yi-Hai blinked at Peter, letting the mechanical arm release Peter. Peter looked at the safe and was eager to rush over to take away the blood, but it was bound to expose his ability. "Yi-Hai seemed to have discovered my secret. He said he would keep it secret for me. I hope so." Gwen was so funny when she saw Peter so nervous. She thought that Yi-Hai would keep Peter's secret from the messy infectious disease. After getting Peter's serum, Yi-Hai was excited. He started working overtime to study Spider-Man's serum. At the beginning, he was just sorting out the data. He only used the first-level brain region, and one scientific value a day was enough. After finishing the data collection, he started the research on the secondary brain domain, and finally opened the third-level brain domain. His IQ was further improved, but the corresponding scientific value was also consumed quickly. It takes 100 points a day to open the third-level brain domain, and his scientific value is only over 1,000 points, which can be consumed within a few days. Because these days Yi-Hai abandoned the study of lizards, the research progress on lizards has stalled, and Dr. Connor is in trouble. In Dr. Connor's office, Dr. Connor and Dr. Lotta are head-to-head. Dr. Connor looked at the little mouse on the table with a look of excitement. "The interracial inheritance has fully worked, Freddy's leg has been fully regenerated, and he is in good health. No side effects have been found recently." He said Freddy was the little mouse on the table. "This is a miracle," Dr. Rada echoed, and looked at Dr. Connor randomly. "But the test is progressing too slowly. You haven't made any further breakthroughs in recent days. The amazing genius Yi-Hai hasn't moved a bit in recent days. It's up, quote, slow." Dr. Connor shook his head. "I don't think so. Scientific research is a gradual process. Not poets can create with inspiration. We need basic research for scientific research. We need basic research to be perfect before our inspiration can start. Otherwise it will help to boost the seedlings, which will have a negative effect." Quote, "But boss has no time to wait for you to study slowly." Dr. Rada stared at Dr. Connor. Dr. Connor paused slightly. Shen said, "He has to wait, it's impossible. Unless he wants to be a mouse." Rada shrugged. "He won't be a mouse. He's very anxious now. He wants you to speed up and get rid of the useless steps." Dr. Connor frowned. "What do you mean, don't you think?" "Yes, it's a human test." Dr. Rada said, "You need a human test." "No, absolutely not." Dr. Connor refused angrily. "This is a life-threatening. Joking about human life, not to mention you can't find volunteers." Dr. Lotta laughed. "We can say it is a flu vaccine, who cares, we can try it at the Veterans Hospital." "Are you kidding me?" Dr. Connor looked at Dr. Rada in wonder. "What do you think?" Dr. Rada sneered and said, "Don't you speak in such a loud voice," as did Richard Parker. What happened? The result was a plain failure, and the couple died, leaving Peter Parker alone, now Spider-Man. Dr. Connor trembled, looked at Dr. Rada silently, and finally shook his head firmly. "I can't do it." "Well, anyway, the formula belongs to the company now. Say goodbye to your dream arm." Dr. Lotta shook his head with regret. "You were fired. You free up your office tomorrow morning. Your little pets can also be taken away." Quote. Talking, picked up some materials and a bottle of serum and walked out of the office. Dr. Connor watched Dr. Rada leave blankly, remembering more than 10 years of hard work, and the dream he had insisted on for more than 10 years was to be destroyed early in the morning. "There will always be a way," he said to himself, and finally stared at the serum on the table. Maybe I can try it for myself. After more than 10 days of research, Yi-hai discovered the secret of Spider-Man. It turned out that Peter could not become a Spider-Man by accident, but because of his father. Yi-hai found through research that animal genes and human genes are two different species genes that conflict with each other. Human beings injected with animal genes can only become animal forms, just like Dr. Lizard became a lizard man. If you want to maintain human shape, you must adapt animal genes to human genes. The solution is to cultivate animal genes. The breeding method is based on the user's own genes, and the animal genes to be fused are selected in advance, and the medicine can be extracted after the animals mature. This technology has matured him more than 10 years ago. This person is Peter's father, Richard Parker. Richard Parker uses his son's genes as a model to cultivate special spiders, so that this special spider is constantly updated and improved. After more than 10 years, special spiders have finally been cultivated. At this time, Peter just came to the Osborn building and was bitten by a special spider, so that the gene of the special spider was perfectly integrated into Peter's body. Peter's ability to become Spider-Man is actually the result of his dad's scientific research, and it has been a whole decade of Osborn. Osborn worked hard to cultivate spiders for more than 10 years, but finally made a wedding dress for others. Because the genes of these special spiders are based on Peter, they can only affect Peter. Other spider genes will only become monsters. These were all reasoned by Yi-hai after researching the perfect fusion of animal genes and human genes, and he firmly believed that basically 8 to 9 are inseparable. Ding! The host has developed a method for the perfect fusion of animal genes and human genes, and the task completion rewards 10,000 scientific values. After Yi-hai discovered Spider-Man's secret, the system also issued a prompt to complete the task. Hearing the sound of the system, Yi-hai could only smile bitterly. Although he fully understands the perfect fusion of animal genes and human genes, the problem is that in order to do this, it is necessary to cultivate animals like Peter's father, and the time of cultivation is generally it will be a long time, usually 10 or 20 years. How could Yi-hai spend this time and have 10 years of energy to create a Spider-Man? It would be better to study the mutant human genes. Mutants are also humans, and their genes will not conflict with ordinary people. When thinking of mutants, Yi-hai couldn't help but feel excited. Many mutants' ability was coveted by him. For example, Wolverine's regenerative ability can make people immortal. Professor X's telepathy ability, Storm Woman manipulated thunderstorm capabilities, and so on, many. Solving the problem of perfect fusion of species genes, Yi-hai is like a treasure, and it can be used to fuse the mutant human genes without much effort. Just like a sentry robot, it can easily fuse mutant human genes. Thinking of this, Yi-hai couldn't help laughing, excited in his heart, not tangled in being unable to become another Spider-Man. Where is the Mutant Academy? It would be nice if I could get into the Mutant Academy to get some mutant blood. Yi-hai muttered to himself, very sorry. Mutant Gwen, who had been paying attention to Yi-hai, said immediately. Are you interested in those monsters? Of course. Yi-hai nodded, yearning. You see, mutants have a lot of strange abilities. They can fly, they can spit fire, they can be invisible, and even immortal. If we can master this incredible ability, then humanity will be a huge evolution. Quote. Gwen did not agree with him. She shook her head. However, mutants are very dangerous. They are often lawless and unscrupulous in breaking the law, often hurting ordinary people, and people are disgusted with them. Yi-hai frowned slightly. This is a process in which the two races run into each other, do not understand each other, and distrust each other. Eventually, conflicts and even wars have evolved. This kind of thing is inevitable. We are scientists and don't care about society. The question of ethics, we need to pay attention to the amazing ability of this strange race of mutants. Quote. Gwen laughed. If you are interested in mutant genes, you can go to the biological warehouse to get some samples for research. What did you say? We have mutant blood in Osborn. Yi-hai was pleasantly surprised, staring at Gwen with a gaze. Gwen pursed and laughed. We Osborn is the world's premier biological research company, wouldn't there be samples of strange creatures like mutants? You are now a first-level researcher at Osborn and have the right to watch these things. Quote. That's great, Gwen. Let's go to the biological warehouse right away. Yi-hai couldn't wait to get Gwen to take him to the biological warehouse. Seriously, He had been in Osborne Industry for many days, but he had been working it and was not familiar with this building. Fortunately, with the help of Gwen, the two entered the biological warehouse smoothly. The biological warehouse is very large and the species are very complete. After hearing about the arrival of Yi-Hai, the director of the reservoir created a middle-aged woman to lead them into the mutant warehouse. After several levels, several people successfully entered the mutants' warehouse. The mutant treasury collected blood and hair of 56 mutants and the remains of 12 mutants, such as brain, arms, thigh fat, etc. Dr. Yi, what do you need to see? The middle-aged woman introduced while walking, and finally asked Yi-Hai politely. Her manners were very decent, and she did not look down on Yi-Hai because she was young. Yi-Hai laughed. I want to see the blood of the 56 mutants, well, and the introduction of their capabilities. Okay. The middle-aged woman used an excuse to link the laptop in her hand to the storeroom. After some operation, the information of these mutants was displayed on the screen. The computer has detailed information of these 56 mutants, including their names, births, addresses, genders, abilities, and a small number of videos showing their abilities. These are mainly volunteers, but there are very few volunteers. You know, mutants like to hide in human society, and many of them are unwilling to reveal their identity. Quote. Gwen wondered, that's not voluntary. How did you get these things? This, said the middle-aged woman, hesitantly looked at the two, and finally said, most of them were obtained from the black market. Black market. Yi-Hai was a nerd, son, who didn't understand these things and looked at the two women in doubt. Gwen rolled his eyes, leaned closer to Yi-Hai, and whispered, it's about hunting for mutants secretly. Ah, Yi-Hai was very surprised, and could not help but be surprised. Being a mutant means being marginalized by the human group, and trouble and danger will accompany it. Would I be a mutant? But Yi-Hai quickly flashed the thought. As long as you become a powerful mutant, you don't have to. Like Wanchi Wong, you have the ability to destroy the world, and ordinary people have. How could it hurt him? Quote. With the knowledge of biological knowledge, Yi-Hai is confident that he is a powerful mutant. He can easily become a powerful mutant with the help of the system. Yi-Hai Ning looked at the data of mutants in the computer, and a series of information came into view. Hebrew Hill, female, 21 years old, lives in New York, ability, can secrete toxins in the left hand, more severe than Cobra, can cause people to die in a minute. Neil Anderson, male, 35 years old, lives in Edward, ability, has strong strength and endurance, looks thin, but can easily lift a 5-ton truck. Baby, male, 1 year old, has 2 heads, looks strange, and is abandoned by his parents. Russ Wood, male, 12, lives in New York, ability, has a cat face, is very agile. Becca Meredith, female, 26, family New York, ability, danger sensing, can react in advance when danger is encountered. Addison, male, 15, lives in Los Angeles, ability, can fly in flight. Cornell Warren, male, 24, lives in Vancouver, ability, can produce smoke that attracts men or the opposite. Cindy Water, female, 34 years old, unknown address, ability, skin becomes stone, firm, hard as steel. Calvin Stowe, male, 26 years old, unknown address, ability, short hair, can grow quickly. Otis Bowman, male, 8 years old, unknown address, ability, super sensitive sensory ability, vision, smell, hearing, etc. are very powerful. Yi-Hai has looked at the capabilities of 56 mutants one by one, and found that many of the mutants' capabilities are strange and diverse, and many of them are not very useful. Among the capabilities of these 56 mutants, he only sees flying ability, danger sensing, super sensitive sensibility, strong power, endurance, agility, and the ability to attract the opposite gender. If it is perfect without that smoke, the most worthy of his research is the ability to grow hair quickly. This ability it is helpful to study the ability of rapid healing. After the final trade-off, Yi-Hai took away flying, danger sensing, super sensitive sensibility, powerful strength, endurance, agile blood, and the blood that the hair healed. After getting a blood sample, Yi-Hai kept Gwen's secret, and then devoted 12 years of enthusiasm to the research of these blood. He perfectly mastered the ability of gene fusion. Osborne's equipment is complete and advanced, plus his after opening the 3rd-level brain domain, it took only more than 3 hours to fuse these abilities together to create a serum. Yi-hai looked at the serum in his hands, and hesitated very much. Although the serum was made, he did not have 100% confidence that the problem would not occur. If you want to know the results, you must perform a human test. Once you perform a human test, you will leave clues and expose your results, so that you can be peeped by many powerful forces, such as the Shield, Hydra, and even Osborn boss Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn is desperate for genetic fusion technology to treat her family's genetic diseases. While he was distressed, the sound of the system sounded in his mind. Ding! It was detected that the host invented the test item. The quality supervision system was officially opened, and the quality supervision system was being opened. Ding! After the QC system is turned on, the host can use the QC system to test the test items, and each test consumes 100 scientific values. Quality inspection system. Yi-hai overjoyed. Test my bottle of serum. Ding! The quality inspection system is activated. The mutant human serum has a fusion degree of 83% with the host. It is not recommended for the host. It's only 83% when lying in a slot. Fortunately, I didn't use it rashly, otherwise I would become a monster. Yi-hai secretly rejoiced. Next, Yi-hai began to further improve the mutant human gene. After 2 hours, ding, ding, the quality inspection system is activated. The mutant human serum is 90% fused with the host. It is not recommended for the host. After an hour and a half, ding, the quality inspection system is activated. The mutant human serum and host fusion degree is 95%. It is not recommended for host use. After an hour, ding, the quality inspection system is activated. The mutant human serum is 98% fused with the host and can be used by the host. It was finally ready for use. Yi-hai breathed a sigh of relief, but he wanted to improve it further, so he went further. After half an hour, ding, the quality inspection system is activated. The mutant human serum is 99% fused with the host, and the host can use it. Ding, the quality inspection system is activated. The mutant human serum and host fusion degree is 99.4%, which can be used by the host. Ding, the quality inspection system is activated. The fusion degree between the mutant human serum and the host is 99.9%, and the test items are almost perfect. It is recommended for the host. Ding! For the first time, the host has achieved 99.9% of the experimental items, which is almost perfect, and rewards the host with 1,000 scientific values. Reward 1,000 scientific values. It's a pleasant surprise that the scientific value spent in quality inspection has been earned again. System, can it be 100%? Yi-hai asked. Nothing can be perfect, and this system is no exception. The system replied. All right, just use it. Yi-hai looked at the laboratory. It is now night. Other colleagues have already left work. Even Gwen, who often haunts him, has returned home. The entire laboratory is silent, leaving him alone. Let him experiment. Yi-hai pierced the syringe containing the variant human serum into the meridians of his left arm. The variant human serum slowly entered the body. At first, he just felt the coldness flowing throughout his body, and slowly began to have fever, accompanied by tingling, as if the muscles and bones were reorganized. This is the mutant human gene is starting to work. The process is painful, but Yi-hai can still stand it. This is the result of his optimization of the gene, slowing down the mutation process, so that the mutation process will not be painfully alive like Captain America. The severe pain lasted for more than an hour, and the pain gradually became lighter. Yi-hai knew that the primary stage of his mutation was over. Then he would slowly mutate and complete the mutation within 3 days. He looked at his body. His arm and thigh muscles were knotted, and he was full of beauty of strength, but he was not too Bian-like. If he didn't take off his clothes, it would not look much different from the original. And there is a clear connection between his body and spirit. He feels that his spirit can control every cell of his body and make them strong. Following this feeling, he controlled the cells of the body, but just jumped a little and jumped more than 10 meters away. Not only that, he also felt that he was full of strength. He had powerful strength, agility, endurance, and beast-like sensitivity, and had the ability to predict danger. In addition to his highly developed 5 senses, seeing more than 10 miles away through the window, the sense of smell can clearly analyze the smell of Gwen Peter they left in the working room, as well as hearing. Finally, What excites him most is flying. Fly. Yi-Hai opened his arms, his body hovered slowly, and then flew around in the workroom like a smart swallow. His flight trajectory was so varied that he was so natural and proficient without any newcomer's hardship. This is the system's credit, and it's his ability to bring about 30% of the brain. After just feeling the ability of the mutant, he used the rich biological knowledge to quickly infer the source of the mutant's ability. The ability of mutants comes from the mutant genes in their body cells. The mutant genes constitute mutant cells. These mutant cells have a variety of abilities. The ability to exert and control this ability is the spiritual energy in the human brain, which is fantasy. The novel is called Spiritual Power. The brain domain opened by the system contains mental power, and the higher the level of the brain domain, the stronger the mental power and the stronger the ability to mutate. System, how strong will my physical strength be now? Yi-Hai asked. It takes 100 scientific values to use the quality inspection system. May I use it? Use. Ding. The quality inspection system is activated. After the host's mutant human ability is stable, the strength of the first level brain domain is increased by about 200 kg, the second level brain domain is about 1 ton, the third level brain domain is about 10 tons, and the fourth level brain is the domain power is about 100 tons, and the fifth level brain domain is about 1000 tons. Finally, the mutant human cells of the host are not strong enough to open the sixth level brain domain to increase strength. Quote, it can be increased to about 1000 tons. This body is really scared. Yi-Hai was very surprised to look at his weak body, and regretted randomly, unfortunately, the opening of the fifth level brain domain requires 10,000 scientific values a day. This is too extravagant. My current 10,000 points is not enough. Quote, ding. The host can use scientific values to solidify the brain domain, 3,000 primary brain domains, 10,000 points in the secondary brain domain, 30,000 points in the third grade brain domain, 100,000 points in the fourth grade brain domain, and so on. The domain must be upgraded step by step, you cannot jump to upgrade. Quote, the first level brain domain needs 3,000 points. My 10,000 point scientific value can only solidify the first level brain domain. The first level brain domain doesn't have much effect, and it only takes a little scientific value to open the first level brain domain. After Yi-Hai thought for a long time, he finally decided not to solidify the first level brain domain first. The Marvel world is very dangerous, and 10,000 scientific values can be reserved for occasional needs. Yi-Hai played in the air for a while, then returned to the computer, deleted all the research data on mutants in the computer, and then greatly modified the results of the genetic fusion of his recently studied species. The results were only in the initial stage. And, paradoxically, there are so many mistakes that no one can see them. After doing all this, I left for work. Ding. In the car, the phone rang and it was Gwen. Yi-Hai, a genius scientist, are you still working? Your mutant human gene, has it produced results? Yi-Hai naturally denied. No, how could it be so fast, and I'm just curious, and I don't intend to study this in depth. You know, Gwen, the mutant is too sensitive, I don't want to be in trouble. That's good. The other side was obviously relieved. It's good if you can understand that. I thought you nerd, the son would be crazy about scientific research, and the rest would be ignored. Yi-Hai teased, I'm not just a nerd who studies only. At least I will invite the beautiful Lady Gwen to eat. When have you invited me? Gwen said, annoyed, I remember you invited me a few times, but never made a promise. Sorry, I've been too dedicated to scientific research lately. Yi-Hai smiled. Gwen, if you are interested in going out to eat today, just apologize to me. If you're still in the studio now, I'll pretend I didn't hear it. Gwen complained. I'm on the road now, on the Williamsburg Bridge. I think we can have a beautiful, wonderful dinner in Brooklyn. Yi-Hai said as he drove. Boom, a violent explosion, followed by a panic scream on the bridge. Many people left the car and ran to the bridge. What happened, Yi? Gwen asked eagerly. Yi-Hai opened the car door, jumped out of the car, and saw a huge green figure running on the bridge. Oh, Gwen, maybe I'll miss my appointment again today. Yi-Hai apologized. In the sky, there is a huge battle fortress suspended. This is the Aegis's flying mothership. Secretary, a big monster appeared on the Williamsburg Bridge, and it was initially judged to be a giant lizard, a detection agent reported. Director Nick Fury quickly looked at the big screen. The screen was a satellite monitoring picture. In the picture was a large lizard, a green linnet, running extremely fast, two claws sharp and strong. One by one to the cars on the bridge overturned, a mouth full of sharp teeth growled upward. Chief Nick frowned, and said, "This kind of creature seems to be a mutant. I don't know if it is a mutant or a biochemical weapon produced by an company. Run out of this lizard to see if it is from somewhere came up." Quote. Yes, the Fatian aircraft carrier's equipment is very advanced, the agents are very efficient, and it doesn't take long for a picture to appear on the large screen. Commissioner Nick saw a huge gap in the Osborne Enterprise building, and suddenly hesitated. It seems that Norman Osborn is completely crazy to treat the family genetic disease. Notify the operation department to arrest this lizard. Quote. Secretary, the satellite detected the action of Spider-Man. He seems to have entered the Williamsburg Bridge. It seems that he wants to fight the big lizard. An agent suddenly reported. Oh, Chief Nick took an interest. Look at the fighting power of this little spider. Please evaluate his fighting power and see if he is suitable to join our shield. Yes, it didn't take long for the agent to yell again. Secretary, the little spider hasn't played yet, and the big lizard is fighting with someone. Human. Is it a mutant? Director Nick looked at the big screen. At this moment a strong and burly man was fighting with the big lizard, and it was a one-sided fight. Originally, Yi-Hai didn't want to worry about his business. The big lizard was so fierce that he didn't bother to care if he didn't bother himself. But the big lizard was too fierce. It played a car as a ball, kept throwing it, and then gradually approached its position. Yi-Hai hid among the crowd. The people around him were screaming in horror. Seeing that big lizard ran violently, and sharp minions attacked a little loli, 7 or 8 years old, Yi-Hai's I can't bother, the mental power burns like gasoline. The body flew out like a shell. However, in order not to get into trouble, he used his strong ability to manipulate body cells to transform the body into a muscular and burly man. The appearance of his face also changed, with sharp edges and a resolute Chinese character face. It looks like Superman, except that there are no red underpants. Boom! The strong sense of crisis made the big lizard's pupils momentarily unresponsive. Yi-Hai's two big fists had hit his scaled head, blood splattered in pain and roared, his body flew out of control, and flew out. The two cars collided distorted. Seeing a move, Yi-Hai looked down and saw the little loli is frightened, with big sapphire eyes, tears, and a mouth that grew up, but made no sound. Yi-Hai felt pity in his heart, fell from his mouth, hugged little loli, flew over the crowd, and called, "Who is this child?" "Mom." Little loli then made a sound. It's a pity that no matter how little Rory shouted desperately, no one came out to collect it. There is no mother who does not love children. It seems that this little loli's mother is more ferocious. Yi-Hai landed on the bridge and stopped a seemingly well-educated middle-aged woman, saying, "This lady, can you please take care of this little girl? I have to get this big lizard off the bridge." The middle-aged woman was just startled, and when she saw Yi-Hai speaks well, she looked at her pitiful look and nodded quickly, okay, no problem. Thank you." Yi-Hai flew into the sky again, and stroked a shadow on the bridge, because the speed was too fast, fierce friction sounded in the air. He felt that he could make his body faster, there is no problem beyond the speed of sound, but he wouldn't do that. In that case, his clothes would burn and become a streaking Superman. Roar! The big lizard roared to the sky, and the wild call was full of the domineering world, like a king in the forest overlooking the beasts. He stared arrogantly and coldly at Yi-Hai, his image was extremely incomparable. From a thin form to a powerful person suddenly, there will be a kind of pride in dominating the world. They all enjoy this ability very much, and they cannot tolerate provocation and threats. Yi-Hai also had this mentality. He flew over the big lizard and mocked, "Are you provoking me?" A big lizard also feels invincible. The eyes of the big lizard bloomed with wisdom, and the corners of the mouth full of fangs were slightly skimmed, seemingly very disdainful. With this human expression, Yi-Hai couldn't help but pause for a moment, then remembered that this lizard was Dr. Connor and possessed human wisdom. Yi-Hai frowned slightly, her body suddenly disappeared, and she suddenly appeared beside the big lizard, stroking her face with that kick. "Look, The big lizard of wool and Chinese net was totally unprepared, or the agility was not enough. Boom! The strong vibration smashed the hard iron bridge into several pits. The pupils of the eyes of the large lizard enlarged for a moment, and the distorted face due to pain was even more sloppy. Roar! The big lizard stood up angrily, and his strong recovery ability quickly restored him to normal. He suddenly grabbed a car next to him and threw it away. The clunky car was as easy as a small stone. Yi-Hai just twitched slightly to avoid the tossed car, then quickly approached, his fist shot quickly, and kept hitting the lizard. The big lizard roared with pain, waving his sharp claws to attack Yi-Hai, and Yi-Hai avoided it. The big lizard attacked extremely fast, but in Yi-Hai's eyes it was very rigid and clumsy. He seemed to be bullying a drunk fat man and hid whatever he wanted. Yi-Hai has noticed the problem of this big lizard. This big lizard should be like a baby born. Now it is a toddler. It has not fully grasped the body. It has huge power in the air but cannot use it flexibly. Yi-Hai is different from him. Yi-Hai is now opening the third-level brain domain, and his body is as sophisticated as a computer. He can control every movement very flexibly. The big lizard had no strength to fight back. In the end, Yi-Hai grabbed the tail of the big lizard and slammed the bridge during the fierce struggle of the lizard. In the bang, a huge pit was smashed on the iron bridge. Here, suddenly Yi-Hai's hands were empty, and only a beating lizard's tail was left on his hand, and the big lizard was fleeing quickly, while throwing out a car. Cars screamed and flew. Yi-Hai escaped one by one. Suddenly a car rolled in the air and quickly approached, accompanied by a woman's frightening cry. Someone inside. Yi-Hai didn't hesitate, grabbed and seized the car in front of him, and the huge impact force knocked him far away before he could stop. Yi-Hai lifted the car very easily. The car floated in midair. The people in the car still screamed exhausted. Yi-Hai couldn't be comforted. Helpless, Yi-Hai flew quickly, put the car by the bridge, and then flew towards the big lizard. If we don't want more casualties, we must make a quick decision. When Yi-Hai rescued people, the big lizard ran on the bridge, making a bumping noise on the bridge, and a huge body slammed into a commercial vehicle. Boom! The commercial vehicle was squashed directly, and the huge claws of the large lizard suddenly penetrated the outer shell of the commercial vehicle, pinching a middle-aged Indian man inside. The big lizard chuckled. "Drive Lada, didn't expect us to meet so soon." "You are you?" Dr. Rada looked at the big lizard in shock, suddenly a flash of light, and exclaimed, are you Dr. Connor?" "The answer is correct." The big lizard laughed. "What do you think of my body? Is it perfect? Perfect and strong limbs, and hard-to-hard scales, all of which surprise you, right?" The large lizard was intoxicated. Dr. Connor completely regarded himself as a lizard. He agreed with the current body and considered the lizard to be the most perfect creature in the world. Human beings are just a large number of tapeworms. Yes, Dr. Connor, why did you find me?" "I didn't mean to offend you, I just followed Mr. Norman Osborn's execution," Rada said in horror. "Do you know what a lizard is? Strong, cold-blooded, and cricket must report, and will attack when it feels dangerous." The giant lizard's huge eyes stared at Rada's fearful face. A feeling of contempt for creatures came to his heart, and he liked this feeling. This little bug dared to offend the great king of lizards. Offend the bug? I should torture him severely, but now the annoying flying guy is here again. As soon as the sharp claws were closed, Rada's neck was pierced, and his head was crushed, his brain and blood splashed around. Dr. Connor did not feel sick, but this smell made him extremely excited. This time the goal was solved. Dr. Connor flung forward, caught the iron pillar of the bridge, and quickly climbed to the bottom of the bridge. "Hi, where are you going, big lizard?" At the bottom of the bridge, a man in a red and black coat stopped in front of him. A silk thread was attached to his head and feet, hanging like a spider. Dr. Connor sneered. "Small spider, do you want to stop me? You know that in nature, spiders have always been the food of lizards. Spiders, you have to deal with smaller crawlers than you." Peter shrugged indifferently. "I think I'm a breeder, and I'll grab you into the zoo and let the children see you. A bunch of bugs want to catch me too." Dr. Connor suddenly rushed forward. Peter sent out spider webs, jumped smartly around the lizard, and soon the lizard was covered with white spider webs and hung on the bridge like a cocoon. Peter smiled smugly, turned around and smiled, Look, man, this big guy is easy to deal with. Is that right? Yi-Hai floated in the air, looked at Peter's uniform with interest, and asked, you made this uniform yourself? Yes. Peter renewed his body, and asked, how? Bright red, aren't you sissy? Yi-Hai teased. Peter hesitated for a moment, looked at Yi-Hai's appearance, and curiously said, dude, aren't you going to wear a uniform? Exposing your appearance like this will cause trouble. Oh, I see, you are the government people. Only the talents of the government don't mind revealing themselves. Generally superheroes are uniformed, and wrapping their faces can avoid a lot of trouble. After all, they have family and friends, and they fight against evil forces. It is very dangerous. The government will still talk about the rules, but those evil forces can ignore it. Offend my reptile to die. Once again teased, Dr. Connor burned in anger and began to lose his senses. A few claws tore off the spider's web and rushed towards Peter. Dr. Connor waved his sharp minions and attacked Peter with an immortal power, as if any copper wall and iron wall could be easily torn through. Yi-Hai flew by lightning, grabbed, and caught Dr. Connor's attack on Peter's right paw. Dr. Connor saw him, slammed against himself, sneered, and decided to crush the guy's hand. Suddenly Dr. Connor's cheeky face froze, and his face showed an expression of unsure self-confidence. I saw Yi-Hai's little hand suddenly burst out of fear, and squeezed his huge right paw tightly. There was a sound of bone fracture in the right paw, and a pain of heartbreaking lungs came. What? Dr. Connor screamed in pain and wanted to break Yi-Hai's hand, but he couldn't break it anymore. He fought desperately to Yi-Hai's head with his left paw, with a whistling storm. Yi-Hai's right fist greeted him, and the two punches and claws with huge differences in size hit each other. Puff! There was another crackling sound, and Dr. Connor's lizard claws had been distorted. Impossible! Dr. Connor yelled in pain. How suddenly this guy became so strong that he completely crushed himself in strength. Call! Yi-Hai shouted, and slammed into the arms of the lizard. The huge impact force hit the large bridge. With a touch, the lizard's huge body came in, his mouth full of fangs, he vomited blood and large guts, his eyes paled, and he looked dying. Crouching. Sister, why are you suddenly so amazing? Peter flew over, asking in surprise. I was so powerful, I just warmed up with him just now. WAP.mtlnovel.com. Yi-Hai's sharp eyes looked at the sky, where a fighter plane flew over with brilliant light. Just a moment ago, his super distant vision found that the fighter was peeping in the distance. With such good equipment, these people must be government people. So he just spent 1,000 points of scientific value to open the 4th level brain region, in order to show the government his powerful power. Let them have some scruples, do not come to trouble yourself easily. The light in the distance approached quickly, and soon a fighter hovered in front of the two. Here, the hatch was pulled open, and a middle-aged man with an quiver behind him appeared in front of them. The middle-aged man said with a serious expression, I'm Eagle Eye. Can you give us the monster in your hand? Immediately after speaking, I saw a huge shadow coming. Hawkeye quickly avoided it and slammed. The big lizard smashed into the warehouse. The warframe shook for a while and swung left and right in the air. Fortunately, the pilot was very good, and finally stabilized the fighter, and there was no flight accident. The members of the action team were horrified and glared at Yi-Hai. Eagle Eye frowned. Sir, can't you say hello first? Yi-Hai shrugged and said, sorry, I didn't expect your toys to be so useless. Okay. Hawkeye couldn't take him, and said, I don't know what the two call them. Call me Spider-Man, Peter said. As for my real name, I'm sorry, I have nothing to say. Yi-Hai Dao. I'm a scientist, you can call me a doctor of science. Peter groaned. Your nickname is too casual, obviously it was just taken. Man, should I get you one? No, I think my nickname is good. Yi-Hai rejected Peter's kindness. Hawkeye held the headset for a while and said, 2, our director wants to see 2, and 2 please go on the plane. But Peter shook his head and said, sorry, I'm a small employee, and I want to give someone pizza, bye. As he said, he spewed a spider silk and flew away. Hawkeye has long been psychologically prepared, so instead of blocking Spider-Man, he looks at Yi-Hai. This person's ability is more powerful. If he can win his joining, S.H.I.E.L.D. will have a big killer. I'm going to date my girlfriend. Bye. After speaking, Yi-Hai also flew away. Well, Everyone is busy, Hawkeye said helplessly, let's go back. The fighter began to rise slowly, and several team members in the cabin pointed at the big lizard. A tall black man said, this big lizard weighs at least 2 tons. Hawkeye looked around and said, it should be more than that. He reached out and touched the body of the lizard. The density of the skeletal armor was very high, and ordinary bullets could not be shot through. Already. Very strong, that doctor of science is very strong. Suddenly, the heart of Eagle's Eye jumped violently, feeling the extreme danger coming, and quickly rolled aside. A huge claw swept across the air, the tall black man was torn in half, and the flowers dyed the whole cabin. Quentin. The partners roared, the firearms in their hands kept firing, and vented on the huge body. The big lizard stretched out a sigh of pain, slammed the body, the door was torn open, and it jumped in a blink of an eye. Tong-tong. The cumbersome lizard tumbling in the air, and finally jumped into the river water, all of a sudden disappeared into the river water, and could not see the figure at all. Down, down, the team members shouted. The fighter plane slowly descended, opened infrared detection, and kept searching on the river. Many fish creatures appeared in the detector, but no huge cold-blooded creature was found. That lizard is a cold-blooded animal that can control the body temperature. Our infrared detector cannot be found. Hawkeye cursed, and finally resigned unwillingly, let's go. Yes, the fighter turned into a streamer, flew into the sky, pierced the clouds, and finally boarded the flying carrier. Commissioner Nick solemnly said, Eagle Eye, what level do you think? Hawkeye thought about it and said, preliminarily, Spider-Man and that lizard are at level 3, and the Doctor of Science can easily bruise the lizard with brute force. It should be level 4. Is there a 4th level mutant again? Chief Nick frowned, looking at the dark sky, and said, very few of the mutants can reach the 4th level. The most famous is X, Professor, and the other, human, maniac like Magneto King. This Doctor of Science has no other ability besides flying and powerful. This must be figured out as soon as possible. Quote, level 4 flight and giant power are not difficult to deal with, but if you have superpowers like Professor X and Wansiwang, it will be scary. So Secretary Nick had to worry. Yi Hefei went to a corner of the city, restored his original appearance, took out his mobile phone, and saw a lot of missed calls after turning on the phone, all from Gwen. She was worried that it was broken. Yi Hai called in the past, and soon the other party connected. Is it Yi Hai? Gwen asked eagerly. Yes, it's me, Gwen. Yi Hai smiled. Thank goodness, you haven't answered my phone. I thought you had an accident. The other side gave a clear breath and asked, Yi, what have you encountered? Why didn't you answer my call? That's it. A big lizard appeared on the Williamsburg Bridge. When I saw it breaking everywhere, it hit him. Come on, Yi, I have read the news. Spider-Man and a flying man are playing the lizard. He is very burly and doesn't look like you at all. Yi, I have never seen anything in the news. To your figure, are you hiding aside, scared to fart and urinate, giggle? Quote, well, that's not me, but I'm not scared to spit out, I'm a very brave man. Okay, brave man, you won't let me dove today. Of course not. The two just talked and agreed on a date, and the date was a coffee shop. It didn't take long for Yi Hai to go to that cafe. There are a lot of people in the cafe, men and women, and many are obviously lovers. They are all well dressed, talking softly and very educated. The doorman took Yi Hai to a position. When Yi Hai took his seat, a beautiful waitress walked over slowly. The waitress has long blonde hair, a quiet smile on her face, and she is full of pure breath, but her sapphire-like eyes seem so vicissitudes that she seems to have experienced many things. How could such a pair of eyes appear on a young girl? It should be on an old man. When Yi Hexen flashed this doubt, he suddenly felt quiet all around. Everyone's movements were still like photos, without making a sound. The surroundings were quiet. There was only the sound of the waitress hitting the ground with her high heels. Hello, my brother, said the waitress politely. Her voice was sweet, but the pace was slow, and it sounded like a puppet at the mercy of others. Yi Hai flashed a person's name in his head. Only he in this city had the ability to easily find himself, and called himself a brother. Yi Hai looked at the waitress and asked, are you Professor X? The waitress was slightly surprised and said, yes, I am Professor X. It seems that you don't know anything about our mutants. Professor X, is famous among mutants, of course I have heard of it. Yi-Hai looked at the waitress and praised, Professor, your mental control is really powerful, and you can control so many people from a distance. Each has his own strength, Doctor. Your strength is also very strong, and my mental ability has no effect on you. It seems that you also have spiritual talent. Professor X looked at Yi-Hai with curiosity, as if he found it's a tadpole. Yi-Hai Song loosened his shoulders and said, I have a lot of abilities, these are just some of my abilities. Professor, do you have anything to do with me today? I don't like to go round and round, please tell me. My girlfriend is dating, I don't want her to find me a mutant. Quote. Professor X smiled with smile, okay, today I found a new 4th level variant. I am very happy, so I ventured to find you and wanted to invite you to come to my college as a guest. Certainly, I have long wanted to see the professor and other friends. Yi-Hai agreed, and asked curiously, Professor, you said that I am a 4th level mutant. How is the level of this mutant divided? Professor X saw him agree, with a bright smile, and explained, Doctor, you should know that the ability of our mutants comes from the X gene and the mental power of the brain. The X gene has superpowers, and mental power is to provide superpowers. For example, to compare our mutants to a car, the X gene is like an engine, and the mental power is gasoline. Within the engine limit, the more gasoline, the faster the engine. This is the car, the source of binning. And so are our mutants. The level of the mutants depends on their mental strength. Quote. This was the same as he had originally expected. Yi-Hai nodded, looking out of the glass window, just to see Gwen's figure, saying, Professor, my girlfriend is here. Let's stop this conversation today. Okay. Professor X took out a note and wrote the address of the college on it. Looking forward to our next official meeting, Doctor of Science. Then the spiritual power in the space disappeared for a moment, and the entire coffee shop came back to life. The crowd continued the original content of the speech, without even realizing that they had been manipulated by them. Sir, what would you like to drink? Said the waitress politely, her eyes wide and watery. Yi-Hai stood up and greeted Gwen. Gwen, you finally come, I want to die for you. Gwen rolled his eyes and looked at the women's clothing. The clerk was full of mischief. I think you guys just had a good time talking. Really, we just talked about what to drink. Yi-Hai was gentle, and helped Gwen remove the chair. After the two were seated, the women's clothing waiter politely said, What do you want to drink? Green tea, coffee. Okay, please wait a moment. The female service clerk turned away. Gwen chuckled. Scientist, that girl was pretty good, right? It just looks good. I like women who are both beautiful and beautiful. Yi-Hai smiled. I know your taste. Gwen smiled, and looked at Yi-Hai with a pair of sapphires, but men like to play a night wind, or something. Okay. Yi-Hai couldn't help her. He took out the note written by Professor X from his pocket. You see, this is just the address of a school. I'm going to go to school all night. Quote. Xavier Talent Junior School. Haha, this is a mutant college. Why would you let it go? Yi, are you a mutant? Gwen haha laughed. Did you know the mutant school? Yi-Hai was surprised. What's weird about this? Don't forget that my dad is the director of the New York City Police Department. He mentioned it to me at this school. Gwen laughed. You haven't told me how you were invited to that place. Gwen's eyes had a sense of exploration. Yi-Hai knew that the girl was very curious. If you want to continue to associate with her, it is better to keep her secret. Yi-Hai said softly, because I am a mutant. Oh, you are a mutant. Gwen smiled, but his expression was not surprised at all, as if he had known it. Yi-Hai frowned. You don't seem surprised at all. Gwen shrugged and laughed. You have performed so well in the lab. Dr. Connor spent 10 years studying the formula of the transmutation rate. It only took you a day to complete it. How could your brain be so smart? Will it be ordinary? You know what? Colleagues say you are aliens, giggles. Quote. It turned out that you had guessed my identity for a long time. Yi-Hai smiled and said, so aren't you afraid? You are handsome, peaceful, and able to solve human problems. Such a useful person should be regarded as a treasure by human society. How can you be afraid? Gwen looked at Yi-Hai strangely. Yi-Hai realized for a moment that he realized that his powerful ability was construction, not destruction, and it was helpful to human society, and human society would naturally accept it. Yi-Hai breathed a sigh of relief and fixedly looked at Gwen. Gwen, what do you think of me? Well, Gwen smiled, and blinked. In addition to looking a little handsome, there is also a nerd. Son, research is too crazy, always forgetting that there is a lady around. Sorry, Gwen, I still think you are more interesting than those studies. Would you like to be my girlfriend? Yi-Hai looked at her with a smile. Gwen was silent for a while, and his face turned red slightly, saying, I don't think I should reject it. After all, you are a mutant, haha. Great. The two confirmed the relationship, their moods became extremely pleasant, and the conversation became extremely relaxed. They talked a lot and felt that time passed quickly. Gwen left half an hour later. After all, she is still a high school girl now, and her life is still under the control of her parents. She can't stay out too late. Immediately after the two separated, Yi-Hai returned home, turned on the computer, and looked at the scientific information. He is now a 4th-level brain domain. He didn't want to waste, and decided to read all night. While reading a book, an unusually normal interface flicker appeared on his computer screen. This change is subtle and ordinary people can't see it, but he is now a 4th-level brain domain and has a strong 5 senses. This change was easily captured. The interface flickers, usually the voltage is unstable, or the amount of information processed by the computer is too high, which causes the computer host chip to generate excessive computing speed, which causes the computer display interface to flicker, and the network is suddenly congested. These are normal. The most worrying thing is that there are other programs intruding into the computer without permission, causing the computer processing speed to be delayed. So-called hackers hacked into his computer. After searching for a few seconds, he noticed that something was wrong. He actually had 1M more in the familiar computer operating system. For ordinary people, how could he remember the size of the files in the system clearly, which is Yi-Hai? This kind of metamorphosis can do it. After another search, Yi-Hai found this extra software. This is a very inconspicuous software, disguised as a systematic image processing system. It is difficult for ordinary people to find, and it is only Yi-Hai. Only those who know well will find it easily. Yi-Hai has now determined that this software is a hacking software. Yi-Hai is so angry that he must give this hacker a deep lesson. Yi-Hai is not very good at hacking technology, so his computer will be invaded by people, but it doesn't matter. His metamorphic learning ability can quickly make him a powerful hacker. Yi-Hai didn't startle this software. Anyway, except for some books and simple materials in his computer, there was nothing particularly important. He first went to the professional website of the hacker, and then bought dozens of professional books on the internet, such as assembly language programming, encryption and decryption technology, Trojan and worm technology, intrusion and prevention knowledge, etc. Because network knowledge is very complicated, the general hacking gangs are divided into categories. One person is responsible for a professional, and is more proficient in this aspect than other team members. But Yi-Hai is different. His strong learning ability can make him proficient in all aspects. He spent 6 hours, read more than 100 professional books, and mastered various hacking expertise in his head. He was confident that his current hacking skills were absolutely top on the planet. Of course, he was not confident on the planet. The strongest. There are too many black technologies in this world. There are many artificial intelligence or black technology gangs. Even if they have powerful knowledge and technology, they will not be their opponents, because they are not comparable to others in hardware. Yi-Hai Hua spent half an hour, wrote a firewall, and an intrusion Trojan and virus. After he turned on the firewall, he was surprised that he found another Trojan. This Trojan is hidden deep enough. This is the top hacking technology. The previous one can only be considered professional. Yi-Hai's eyes were fixed, his 10 fingers twitched quickly on the keyboard, and after half an hour, he found the source of the Trojan horse program through obstacles. Shield. Yi-Hai was slightly surprised, and then smiled bitterly. It was monitored by Shield. No wonder the hacking skills are so powerful. After speaking, he threw the virus he wrote into it, and then quickly exited, disappearing without a trace. Later, I looked for the source of the first Trojan software. This time went well, but after a minute, I found the other party. Yi-Hai smiled. He knew this person, his boss, Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn also hacked into my computer. It seems he should have noticed something. Yi-hai frowned slightly, but what he was most worried about was the big boss of Osborne, because all his research was carried out in the Osborne Industrial Building, and maybe he was constantly monitored by this guy. It is likely that his own research has been. He saw it clearly. Thinking of this, Yi-hai immediately launched an offensive, entered the computer of Norman Osborne silently, checked all the computers of his chain, and finally entered the monitoring equipment of the Osborne building, repeatedly. Forte found it several times before retreating. He breathed a sigh of relief. Osborne did not find his genetic fusion and research on mutants. It was because Osborne's monitoring system discovered that Yi-hai had records of deleted experimental data, which caused Norman Osborne's alert, but he obviously doesn't think that someone can break through these scientific difficulties in a short time, so he didn't delve deeper, just checked Yi-hai's computer with hacking technology to see if he had hidden anything. This is a method often used by Norman in the past. His hacking software was purchased from a top hacking gang in the Earth. It is said that the hacking gang is ranked in the top 10 on the Earth. Even the US government can provide hacking software for its own security in general, they don't do that. Norman is using this software to monitor its powerful scientists. It can be said that God is unaware of the ghost and has never been found. This time Yi-hai's outstanding performance aroused Norman's interest. According to previous rules, he also invaded Yi-hai's computer. He browsed on Yi-hai's computer and found nothing suspicious, but only found this young man. Man is very easy to learn, because his computer holds many professional books. It's no wonder that being young can help Connor perfect the rate of change formula. Norman lamented. He is a successful entrepreneur and a well-known scientist. He always admires hardworking young people. Dee. Suddenly an alarm sounded from his computer. It was an intrusion or a virus that damaged the computer system. Norman moved quickly and cut off the network quickly, but the alarm still continued, and a video suddenly jumped out, occupying the entire screen of the computer. Oye! A blonde girl with a luo body is riding on a man, constantly going up and down, very hard and Xiao Soul. This is a pleasing picture. If this blonde girl is not her secretary and lover, it is perfect already. Bo, this fool, Norman snarled. Chapter 11. In the sky, flying carriers. There is also a farce here. Oye, hurry, Nick. On each monitoring screen of the flying carrier, two hands of black-skinned men and women are playing. The woman with dark-skinned chocolate has a strong, explosive figure, her action is wild, she is sweating, and is calling the name of Nick indefinitely, cry loudly and wildly. The agents of the flying carrier are weird and do not want to look at the screen, but they also watch it secretly, because the actor is their wise and superior director Nick Fury. Nick's black face was even darker at the moment, leaping wildly, and shouting, as the technical team all eating shit. Why not get rid of this video? In the face of the director's anger, the agents were even more afraid to speak out and buried their heads in the brothers. The technical team is working hard, but the other party's virus is special. The new algorithm of the virus has never been seen. This new virus seems to be growing in the system. The virus is completely integrated with the monitoring system in a short time. It will take a long time for the team to crack this virus, and I recommend the director to turn off the surveillance equipment. Quote. Deputy Commissioner Maria Hill held back a smile. Her young and beautiful face was still a frosty expression, but anyone could see the drama in her beautiful eyes. Turn off the monitoring. Nick, the director, hesitated for a while. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s duty is to monitor those aliens. What if the other party has a conspiracy, turn off the monitoring system by himself and mess up? Maybe the other person will show this shy video, just to let us turn off the surveillance system. The more Nick thought, the more he felt the other's poison, and the other was for this purpose. Facing the dilemma, Nick, who has always been decisive, could not help hesitating. Maria Hill looked at her immediate superior and was looking forward to what decisions her superior would make. No, Chief Nick, who had a strong psychological quality, finally rejected Maria's proposal, but he couldn't stand the weird anger in the entire hall, saying, Maria, you are here to direct for the time being, I must find that organization. Observe, Maria said blankly, but she decided to laugh out of nowhere. As a result, the screen of Nick Warrior, sensual girl continued to be displayed on the monitoring screen. It lasted for more than an hour before the technical team deleted the virus and ended the farce. Agents also watched the entertainment activities of their Director General as a child. Mr. Secretary, this is very powerful. I can't tell that Mr. Secretary is always strong, and he has good charm. He can seduce this kind of beautiful black pearl. The director is a 10-level special and possesses Superman ability. It is normal for him to last more than an hour. The agents whispered and whispered. Nick entered the command center with a somber face and asked, "Does the other party act?" Maria frowned. It's strange that the other party fought such a big battle. It should be for us to turn off the surveillance system, but they didn't act. So they know that the director did not turn off the surveillance system. Nick stared at him with one eye. You mean there is a gap between our agents? Maybe it's the other person's prank. Maria joked. Nick's face was dignified and he said, "Do you think it is possible? Our S.H.I.E.L.D. computer system is the highest on the planet. No matter what hacking group wants to invade our computer system, it will pay a huge price and energy. You say, Commander Hill, they're just going to do pranks." Quote. Yes, Director, your judgment is correct. Maria Hill's delicate face also began to become heavy. Persons who send out any messages within the last hour are quarantined. Chief Nick ordered. S.H.I.E.L.D. began a secret overhaul. The S.H.I.E.L.D. had headaches all over the place, and it was so painful that it couldn't be helped. What they didn't expect was that the farce was caused because they monitored the computer of a young scientist, and Yi-Hai threw out the virus, which was a prank. The next day, Yi-Hai went to work as usual. However, the atmosphere of the Osborn building today is somewhat wrong. There are many people in black inside. It is said that these people belong to the National Security Agency. A young female secretary came over with a gentle middle-aged man, who was polite to Yi-Hai. "Hello, Dr. Yi, my name is Phil Coulson, can I ask you a few questions?" Quote. Of course. Yi-Hai looked at the famous agent and laughed. "Mr. Coulson, do you want to ask Dr. Connor?" "Yes, Dr. Yi. Dr. Yi is really young and promising." Phil Coulson praised Yi-Hai for a moment, and then entered the topic. "I heard from Osborn employees, and Dr. Connor has been studying the transformation. The rate formula was perfected by Dr. Yi, so Dr. Yi should know how Dr. Connor transformed into a lizard man." Quote. I'm sorry. The young female secretary chimed in and said, "Mr. Coulson, you're wrong. Dr. Connor hasn't become a lizard. He disappeared that night, and it must have been the one who broke in. The big lizard ate it. Oh God, that's unfortunate." Quote. Phil Coulson shrugged and said, "Maybe." Phil then asked a few more questions, but there was a female secretary. Yi-Hai didn't cooperate, and couldn't set out anything useful, and finally had no choice but to give up. Finally, the young female secretary smiled with a smile and said, "Drive Yi, the chairman Mr. Osborn wants to see you, please come with me." Okay, beautiful lady. Finally, to see the chairman, Yi-Hai was slightly excited. He always wanted to see this person. He could treat the genetic disease in Norman, and it would be a big deal. Before, when he was an ordinary person, he did not dare to trade with this powerful capitalist. Now that he is already a powerful mutant, there is no need to worry about it. The female secretary is wearing a black, female uniform, and her short skirt is wrapped around her round hips, exposing a pair of beautiful long legs. What makes Yi-Hai funny is that this female secretary, he just saw her work on her computer last night, that is, she loves a video with a man, and he also sent this video to Norman's computer. The female secretary seemed to be very interested in him, telling Yi-Hai that her name was Udula Senior, and she talked to him with interest along the way, but Yi-Hai had no interest in her, just perfunctory. The two walked into the elevator. There were only two of them in the narrow elevator. The female secretary's face had a bright smile, and a pair of eyes suddenly flashed a golden light. Yi-Hai's mind suddenly felt a sense of crisis rising from her heart, always feeling something wrong. The elevator stopped abruptly, and it suddenly descended rapidly. The change was too fast. If Yi-Hai was not a mutant, I am afraid that he would fall to the ground. And the beautiful female secretary stood as steady as a mountain, looking at him with a smile. By this time, if Yi-Hai hadn't noticed the problem, he would have spent his clever mind. "Who are you?" Yi-Hai stared at the female secretary. Suddenly the female secretary floated like a wave, and soon became a person covered with blue scales. Her figure was completely highlighted, and she looked very Xing, but it also made people feel infiltrating. Yi-Hai was slightly surprised, and blurted out, "The Devil Girl." The Devil Girl laughed. "It seems that Dr. Yi knows a bit about our mutants." "Yes, I'm the Devil Girl. It's a wonderful transformation ability." Yi Hai admired. He looked with interest at the ministry of the witch girl, with light in his eyes, and he was very interested in the deformed genes of the witch girl. The witch-shaped woman was frightened by his heart, and he felt uncomfortable, and shook his body, saying, "Drive Yi is really a research madman. No wonder our leader will let us invite you to join our organization. Is it for my genetic fusion knowledge?" Yi Hai's gaze remained on the demon-shaped woman, thinking in her heart whether she should suddenly have a problem, and then took a little blood from her. "Yes, the leader thinks you are talented in this area, so you were lucky to be picked by him," giggles. The Devil Girl giggled, and her body was floating like a wave again. The blue scales disappeared and she became the female secretary again. Ding! The elevator stopped in the garage on the second floor, the elevator door opened, and a tall man appeared in front of the two. The man had scattered white long hair, a wide face, and a pair of dark eyes staring hard at Yi Hai. It seems that there is a deep hatred with Yi Hai in general. Yi Hai stared at him for a moment. This unknown man is very powerful, and may have 3 or more levels. The witch-shaped woman comforted. "He is a saber-toothed tiger. You don't have to worry. His expression has always been this way. As long as you don't resist, he will not hurt you." Saber-toothed tiger. Yi Hai heard these 3 names, and was ecstatic in his heart. The real name of the saber-toothed tiger Victor Creed is the half-brother of Wolverine. He has the same healing ability as Wolverine, regardless of strength and speed. The observation power is above Wolverine. The healing ability of metamorphosis has always been longed by Yi Hai. With this ability, he can live forever, and it is very likely that he will never die. Who can resist this ability? Ding! Trigger the task. Study the perfect fusion between regenerating genes and ordinary cells. The task time is 1 month, and the task successfully rewards 10,000 scientific values. Ding! Trigger the task. Study the perfect fusion between the deformed gene and ordinary cells. The task time is 2 months. The task successfully rewards 10,000 scientific points. The mission was released, and the rewards were so rich. Yi Hai could not wait to get the blood of these 2 mutants immediately, and then researched. Yi Hai Cheng suppressed the excitement in his heart, looked around, he smiled. "Do you have any other mutants? Let them come out." The witch-shaped woman looked at this weird scientist strangely, and wondered why this human was not afraid of seeing the mutant, but looked very excited. Sure enough, scientists can't look at it as ordinary people. "There is no one else, just the 2 of us. I think the 2 of us are here with sincerity, right, Dr. Yi?" The demonic girl giggled. "In fact, there is another person who is hiding, which is the one who destroyed the elevator system, but the mutant is a technical type, and the witch girl does not need to say." "Ah, it's a pity. How come 2 people came?" Yi Hai shook his head and regretted. "What?" The witch girl looked at him in surprise, wondering why he said such things. "Because I like mutants." Yi Hai smiled. He grabbed both hands with the witch-shaped girl and saber-toothed tiger. The huge force easily caught him. The witch-shaped girl was firmly clamped and unable to move. The other hand was in trouble. Although he successfully grasped the saber-toothed tiger's neck, the saber-toothed tiger didn't care, and his long fingernails quickly hacked at Yi Hai's arm. Yi Hai was a little surprised, but he still has the 4th-level brain domain, with 100 tons of power, not all saber-toothed tigers can deal with. He just gently sends his arm, and saber-toothed tiger flies out like a cannonball. Hit the wall severely, the reinforced concrete mixed strong wall cracked, and the saber-toothed tiger's huge body fell deeply into it, and passed out for a while. "Are you a mutant too?" The witch woman horrified. Yi Hai smiled. "That's right." The witch-shaped woman calmed down the fear and forced to calm down. "Drive Yi, since you are a mutant, then we are brothers. Would you like to join our brotherhood of mutants? I think our leader saw you as powerful mutants will be happy." Quote. Yi Hai shook his head and said, "Sorry, miss, I have no interest in anti-human kinds. However, I am a scientist. If there is any strange research, we can cooperate." "Of course you can." The devil girl is overjoyed, and being able to cooperate with such a powerful mutant is beneficial to their brotherhood. The witch woman said calmly, "Will you meet our leader with us then?" "I don't want to see the Magneto now." Yi Hai shook his head slightly, took out his mobile phone from his pocket, and called Gwen. Gwen, you bring some syringes to the second basement of the building. Let Gwen bring a syringe, which is naturally used to draw the blood of the devil-shaped woman and saber-toothed tiger. You better stop your other brother from bothering my girlfriend, otherwise I don't know what I will do. Yi-hai stared coldly at the witch-shaped woman with her hand. With a little hard work, the demon-shaped woman suddenly felt the clack of her hand bones, and the pain was like a knife cut. The goblin nodded quickly. I know, Burden. Stand by, don't act. Burden is the third mutant. He is lurking in the control room of the Osborne building. Through the camera in the underground garage, he can see the situation in the garage clearly. Although he is anxious, he receives the order from the devil. After that, he could only stand by and watch Gwen sit down safely in the elevator. Soon Gwen came to the second basement of the building and saw Gwen holding a beautiful woman by the hand, frowning. Yi, what's wrong with this lady? Yi-hai smiled slightly, pointed to the direction of the saber-toothed tiger, and said, look over there. Gwen screamed at the plight of saber-toothed tiger, what's going on? Yi-hai laughed. Don't worry, everything is under control. Do you know Wanchi Wang? These two are under the control of Wanchi Wang. They originally wanted to take me to do research for them, but they were unfortunate. They don't know I'm their brother, hey. Quote. Gwen was still worried. This is a big deal, there are cameras everywhere, your identity is exposed. Yi-hai shrugged indifferently. When exposed, I will be exposed. I have my own method. The witch-shaped woman replied with a smile. Don't worry, I will let Burden delete the video record here. Dr. Yi will never be exposed. However, Dr. Yi is worried about his situation and can join our Brotherhood of Mutants. It's a mutant, no one will reject you, watch out for you, and fear you. Quote. Yi-hai interrupted. I'm living very well now, and don't want to participate in human causes. I told you, I just like scientific research. If there is any strange research, we can cooperate. Quote. Okay, I'll report what you mean to the leader. The witch-shaped woman nodded. So, Dr. Yi, can you let us go? Of course. Yi-hai took the syringe in Gwen's hand with a smile, and said, as long as you give me a little blood. The witch-shaped woman suddenly changed color, and said, what do you want to do? Yi-hai froze slightly. I didn't expect her to respond so much. She thought for a moment and realized that if the X-Men series had happened in this world, then the government has been studying mutants. Caught in jail, tortured as a test product, many mutant brothers and sisters have been subjected to various terrible experiments like mice, so she hates humans very much, and it is excusable to be extremely aggressive. After all, this is also a poor woman. Yi-hai felt a little sympathy in his heart, and he couldn't help but softly said, you can rest assured that I am a mutant. As one of the mutants, this is an unchangeable fact, so you don't need to worry about my experiments with the mutants. I'm just interested in mutant genes and do some basic research. Maybe I can work out the mysteries of mutants and let humans evolve into mutants together. Everyone, regardless of whether they are mutant brothers or sisters, will not there are disputes now, haha. Quote. In the end Yi-hai smiled. His words could only be a joke. Even if all human beings become mutants, they will still have disputes. Human beings are always combative creatures. The demon goddess calmed down in disdain. You are a little fart, have read a few books, and dare to say that researching mutants, so many human scientists have worked hard for half a century without results. Do you think you can row? Whether you believe it or not. Yi-hai smiled slightly and inserted the syringe into the arm of the witch-shaped woman. Seeing that the syringe was slowly filled with blood, her heart was excited. After getting the blood of the devil-shaped woman, Yi-hai flashed to the side of the saber-toothed tiger, pulled him out from the wall, and trembled with his arm. Then the saber-toothed tiger woke up, with a threatening cry in his mouth, the roar it is like a tiger, not nicknamed the saber-toothed tiger. Relax, little tiger, I just want some blood. Yi-hai smiled lightly. Roar. The saber-toothed tiger roared and waved his long finger claws to attack like lightning. Yi-hai just folded his hands together and grabbed his two arms firmly. No matter how he struggled, he clamped him under his arm and walked to the grid. In front of Gwen. Gwen, help get some blood. Yi-hai smiled at his girlfriend. Okay. Gwen was a little afraid of this saber-toothed tiger like a beast. In the end, the devil-shaped woman grabbed the syringe and slammed it into the blood vessel of the saber-toothed tiger's arm. After drawing blood, she looked angrily at Yi-Hai. Of course. Two walked slowly. Yi-Hai threw the saber-toothed tiger out of hand. The two mutants quickly got into the car and fled away. Yi-Hai looked at the mutant human blood in excitement, and could fuse the mutant human gene again. Phil Coulson heard that several members lurking in Osborn's garage had been attacked, and hurried down, asking his assistant, "How is it?" The assistant said, "The hair that has been dropped by the other party has been tested by the Magneto, saber-toothed tiger. There are no other people. We don't know yet. The other party has modified the surveillance video. Anyone from the Magneto?" Phil frowned, muttering, "What are they doing here at the Osborn Industrial Building? Are there things they are interested in?" The aide speculated. "Osborn has done experiments with mutants. Did these extremists come to destroy?" Phil looked at the huge pit on the wall and laughed. "Maybe, but they seem to be in trouble. It is possible to make mutants like saber-toothed tigers like this. It seems that this Osborn is very problematic. They may have already the success of the fusion of animal genes with humans, and even the development of finished products, is very dangerous and must be monitored by the government." Quote. But Osborn was obviously reluctant to make it public, the assistant said. Old Norman would not admit it. "Then let's find out their products." Phil looked away and ordered, "Send a good agent into Osborn to see what Norman is doing." Yes. After Yi-Hai returned to the studio, he began to study the blood of saber-toothed tigers. The blood of this mutant is different from the last. The blood of the last mutant was studied by researchers. There is detailed research data. Yi just used the C. But this time, Yi-Hai knew nothing about the genes of the saber-toothed tiger and the witch-shaped woman, and had to re-examine it. He was not in a hurry to carry out genetic research, but used his powerful hacking technology to invade Osborn's central computer, reopen a secret account, and use the secret account to open a special area in the central computer, so that he can did research unconsciously. Even if that big boss Norman had doubts in his heart, he couldn't find a problem. At the beginning, he first collected data, and then input it into the central computer. He simulated the blood of the saber-toothed tiger and recorded its changes. This process is a technical data collection. It is anxious. Come slowly. Yi-Hai completed the process for 5 days. After the data collection was completed, he opened the third-level brain domain and spent another 3 days to complete the final steps. Ding! The quality inspection system is activated. The mutant human regenerative serum has a fusion degree with the host of 92%, and the test item has an ancestral gene. It is recommended that the host be removed. Ancestral gene. Yi-Hai remembered that the saber-toothed tiger looks a bit like a tiger. Is this it? Yi-Hai refocused his eyes on the screen. There were a lot of gene fragments on it. He glanced around and found several spiral genomes, saying, "Central computer, check this gene." Soon a central computer said, "This gene has animal characteristics and it is perfectly fused. Remove these beastly traits." After a busy period, Yi-Hai finally got a new serum and said in his heart, "System, open the quality supervision system." Ding! The quality inspection system is activated. The fusion degree of the mutant human regenerated serum and the host is 99.9%. The test items are almost perfect. It is recommended for the host. Ding! The host completes the task of perfect fusion of regenerating genes and ordinary human genes, and rewards 10,000 scientific values. Yeah, it's finally done. Yi-Hai happy. Gwen came together and whispered, "Do you really complete the fusion research of mutant genes and ordinary people?" In order for Gwen to help himself, Yi-Hai did not conceal his research on mutant genes. Yi-Hai shook the serum in his hand and said slightly, "This is the result of my research these days." Gwen stared at the green serum, still dare not to believe, this serum can really make ordinary people into mutants. Yes, this mutant has very special genes. It can give people the ability to regenerate metamorphosis. They can recover quickly after being injured, and they can always maintain their original appearance. They will not grow old and have no lifespan limit. Really, this is the elixir of immortality. Gwen's eyes glowed, looking at the serum full of longing. Keeping young and old is a fatal confusion for a woman. Seeing her attracted, Yi-Hai laughed, "Do you want this ability?" "Of course I think," Gwen said without hesitation. "Aren't you afraid of becoming a mutant and being rejected by ordinary people?" Yi Hai smiled. You need to know that being a mutant means that all the troubles around you will be found. Gwen laughed. A person will always die on the bed, but we must not be afraid of the bed. Oh my God, is not old, who can resist this kind of confusion? Yi Hai, give it to me. As you wish. Yi Hai put a bottle of serum in Gwen's hand. After injecting this serum, it will hurt for a while. I suggest you go home and inject it. No, I'm going to inject now. Anyway, there are only 2 of us in the studio. Peter doesn't know what he's doing. He hasn't been to work for several days. Gwen smiled and said, are you going to inject now? Yes. Yi Hai took out another bottle of serum, took out the syringe, and slowly injected the bottle of serum into the body. After the serum entered the body and flowed throughout the body, there was a reaction soon. Yi Hai could clearly feel that the serum changed the hematopoietic function of the bone marrow after the blood entered the bone marrow. The blood changed a lot. Every cell in the whole body changes every cell. This time was fast, and the transformation was completed in less than 10 minutes. Yi Hai picked up a small knife and stroked his arm. A deep scar appeared. The pain came from the arm. At the same time, there was a fierce itchiness. This was the effect of the regeneration function. What? Gwen exclaimed, watching inexplicably the wound on Yi Hai's arm healed quickly. In the end, there was not even a scar left, as if he had never been injured. It's incredible. Gwen grabbed Yi Hai's arm and took a closer look, then touched it. The tentacles were smooth and there were no traces of injuries, and he giggled, it's incredible. I will have this to effect. Quote. Of course you can. Yi Hai was a little worried. But you are not a mutant, so this bottle of serum on your hand is not the same as mine. It will hurt after injection. You need to be patient. Don't you think of me as a tender little girl. What a bitterness to count. Gwen slipped the corner of his mouth slightly, quickly picked up the syringe to put his own note into his body. Oh, it hurts, Gwen exclaimed. Her delicate body began to shake violently. Her body was sweating. Yi Hai took her in her arms, and said softly, keep on, I will always be with you. Quote. Gwen nodded, Feng, moist lips biting hard and not letting her make a sound. She was a strong and competitive girl. She didn't want Yi Hai to think she was a little girl who needed her care. This process lasted for more than an hour. It was so difficult and long, but with Yi Hai's company, Gwen finally came through. Gwen thought that she should collapse, but in fact she was full of energy. It seemed that the body was a perpetual motion machine with endless energy. It's awesome. This feels great. Gwen cried cheerfully, then picked up the knife from the stage, hesitated, and made a small opening in his arm. A little blood leaked from the small opening, but soon recovered. Gwen was overjoyed, and made a long cut with a knife, and naturally recovered quickly. This regeneration ability is so powerful. Yi Hai, I will not grow old in the future, right? Gwen looked at Yi Hai with a pair of surprised eyes. Yi Hai nodded and said, yes, you will be the same as me forever. It's great, it's great, it's great. Gwen jumped in excitement, and then her nose twitched a little. Her sensitive nose made her smell the sweat of the 2 men, and she frowned. It smells bad, we have to take a bath. Quote. Yes, I think we should take a bath together. Yi Hai looked at Gwen with a smile. Gwen Chow read his face slightly, raised his face, and said, come on, rookie. Rookie. Yi Hai smiled, picked up Gwen, and ran into the laboratory's bath, indoor. In the end I was in trouble. My God, bleeding again, do I have to be a Chew girl every time? Yi Hai also had a headache. It was a wise man who had lost all his worries. He did not expect that Gwen was still a complete body. He had known that he would get her on first, and then give her a serum injection. What to do? Yi Hai, I don't want us to get every time we love, said Gwen angrily. Leave it to me, and I will help you solve this problem. Yi Hai couldn't laugh or cry. A man is really happy to get a Chew girl, but this is mainly a psychological possessive desire to be satisfied, rather than a simple film, like Gwen will only make a man collapse. Ding. Trigger the mission. Help Gwen change the girl's physical fitness. The mission time is 5 days, and the mission success rewards 1,000 scientific values. Chew girl, constitution. The word is really accurate, Yi Hai laughed. The situation became like this. The 2 of them could only stop for a while. After awake, they put on clean clothes and walked out of the bath room. System, how much scientific value do I have now? Yi-Hai asked in his heart. There are 18,193 scientific points. There are more than 18,000, then first-level brain area is solidified. Yes. Ding. The host solidifies the first-level brain domain, consuming 3,000 scientific values, and the remaining 16,193 scientific values. As soon as the voice of the system fell, Yi-Hai felt a special energy entering the brain, felt that the brain was extremely warm, and there was a warm feeling of comfort. In the end, it seemed that the brain suddenly exploded, and the feeling of warmth suddenly disappeared and recovered. The original look. Ding. The host has completed curing of the first-level brain domain. In the future, the host's normal state of the brain domain is 10%, and it is not necessary to consume scientific values. In the research area, roar. In a confined steel prison, a middle-aged man yelled an angry roar, beating his hands against the wall, and his body quickly swelled with the sound of a swell. Green scale armor, with a long tongue spitting out from the mouth, and a pair of golden eyes swimming around. What is it doing? A lot of researchers in white coats fought outside the control room. One of the young researchers couldn't help asking. Maybe he is thinking, he is a lizard now, does he have a human mind? Yes, there are preliminary observations, but how much human thinking remains is uncertain. The researchers discussed with great interest, and suddenly a video was connected to the computer, and a tired middle-aged man appeared on the screen and asked, "How is the human trial doing?" The person in charge shook his head with regrets. "Chairman, I'm sorry, the test product still can't maintain the human shape. We don't know enough about the transformation rate. Dr. Connor's participation is also required, or Dr. Shinlai can do it." The middle-aged man was silent for a while and said, "Okay, I will arrange it." With Yi-Hai's understanding of genes, it's not difficult to change Gwen's Chu girl's physique. Yi-Hai estimates that she can solve this problem in 2 or 3 days with her own ability. The next day, while Yi-Hai was experimenting, a beautiful woman in a black women's suit came in, and her body and beautiful face suddenly caught Yi-Hai's attention. He asked, "Who are you looking for?" The beauty smiled sweetly. "Are you Dr. Yi?" "Yes, I am." Yi-Hai nodded. The beauty stretched out, white, tender hands and said, "I'm Natasha Romanov, and I'm the new secretary of the chairman." "Hello." Yi-Hai shook her hand gently, thinking, Natasha Romanov. Isn't this the name of a black widow? She went to Ottoman to be the secretary, did she come to check me? Quote. "What do you find me for?" Natasha laughed. "It's not that I'm asking you something, but the chairman is asking you something. He is waiting for you in the office. Dr. Yi, please come with me." Okay. Yi-Hai nodded slightly, only to remember that there was such a person. Recently, he has been busy studying mutant gene technology, but he forgot the chairman. This time, he can work with the chairman himself. Yi-Hai walked out of the studio with Natasha and asked, "Miss Natasha looks very young. What school did you graduate from?" Natasha laughed. "Moscow University. University of Moscow." Yi-Hai looked at Natasha. "Is Miss Natasha not an American?" "Yes, I am Russian." "Miss Natasha has a great body. Does she exercise regularly?" "Of course, I enjoy working out." "What sport do you like?" "Fighting." Miss Natasha is really interested. They two chatted along the way, reached the top floor of the Osborne building, and entered the chairman's office. There is a middle-aged man with gray hair standing in the office. His face is not very old, but his face is sick. Osborne's genetic genes have begun to work, and his life is almost over. This person is naturally Norman Osborne, Osborne's chairman. When Yi-Hai saw Norman, he opened the door and saw the mountain road directly. It seems that the chairman is not ill. If you don't have a gene repair agent, you can't live for 2 months. Norman immediately glared at him, saying, "Drive Yi, you should have a little respect for your boss, or a little pity for a patient." Yi-Hai shrugged and said, "Of course, but chairman, rest assured, I can solve your genetic disease." Norman's mouth slightly ticked, slightly disdainful. "Oh, young people are too confident, right? As far as I know, you haven't got anything in your recent genetic research." Yi-Hai also scorned. "That's because I have no interest in studying animal gene fusion technology. That will be a way to return. Even if it is successful, it will become another Dr. Connor. That was just an accident. I believe the animal fusion gene technology will become perfect." Norman said unhappy. But Chairman, are you too late? Yi-hai looked at Norman with a mockery. Let me talk about your recent moves. You can't wait to start researching human experiments, but there are no results except to create a few monsters. So you thought of me, and this time you came here to intimidate me into participating in human trials, right? Quote. Norman changed his color. You peeked at my experiment. Yi-hai pointed his head and said, I don't have to look, I can know what the chairman will do. Then he stared directly at Norman. I'll tell you straight, Mr. Osborn, I have the complete genetic technology, but you have to pay the price if you want to get it. Norman laughed angrily and said, you are my employee, and all your research results are mine. Young people, don't be a little clever and get ridiculous. There are many dangers in this world. Something will die. Quote. Yi-hai ignored his threats at all, but grabbed a statue on the wall with his right hand. This artwork made of steel in Yi-hai's hands changed shape as easily as playing mud. Norman's pupils shrank, and his face was full of shock. Yi-hai looked at Norman's expression and smiled slowly. Let me talk about your experiment. Lizard serum can cure your genetic disease, but it will make you a big lizard. Definitely not willing to do so, then, look at what I am now, I can keep you humanoid. Quote. You mean, Norman stared excitedly at the deformed statue in Yi-hai's hand and trembled, you have solved the problem of lizard gene deformation. Sorry, no, Yi-hai shook his head slightly. But I have made breakthroughs in other areas, so I am confident that I can heal your genetic disease in 1 month. The steel statue has been changing. Norman's heart twitched. He knew that the power he possessed could not threaten the young man, and he had to use other methods. Norman took a deep breath, staring at Yi-hai with a grin, and grinned, young man, tell me your terms. A 20% stake in Osborn Industry. 20%. Norman changed his color suddenly, angrily. Young man, do you know how much Osborn has 20%? At least hundreds of billions of dollars. Do you think your research is worth hundreds of billions of dollars? Yi-hai calmly said, this is to save your life, isn't it? Also, I will provide other technologies to make Osborn more competitive in the biological field. Norman apparently didn't believe what he said. He believed more in his previous experience. He shook his head and said, 20% is impossible. I can give you up to 5%. Dr. Yi, 5% is already very high. I think scientists in this world no one would think this is less expensive. Quote. Seeing his bitter hatred, Yi-hai laughed. The 5% stake is indeed not low, but you will only get me to solve your genetic problems. Mr. Norman, you have to think about it, don't regret it later. Quote. Norman solemnly said, Drive Yi, I am a businessman. I don't believe in the promise of the vernacular. The real product I want to see. As long as you can really come up with a good test product, we will have further discussions. Opportunities, otherwise, it's just a waste of our time. Quote. It seems Mr. Norman still doesn't believe me. Yi-hai nodded. He smiled. Well then, I'll solve your genetic problems first. Mr. Norman, you can provide me a little blood first, I can within a month, solve your problem. Quote. Yi-hai is not in a hurry to get 20% of the shares, and slowly get it later. The other party will promise one day. He has a comprehensive plan in his mind. Yi-hai stared at Norman faintly like a wolf. Norman was very uncomfortable. He had an ominous premonition in his heart. He had a premonition that he would make a deal with this guy. Eventually, Osborn might fall into it, but he did not. He cherishes his life, he doesn't want to die. I hope so. Norman finally reluctantly compromised, allowing Yi-hai to draw a little blood. Ding. Trigger the mission. The host solves the Norman genetic problem. The mission time is 10 days. The mission success rewards 2,000 scientific values, and the mission failure deducts 1,000 scientific values. After returning to the studio, Yi-hai continued to invest in research. After work in the afternoon, Yi-hai and Gwen drove to a suburb of New York City where there was an unknown school. Even local people don't know this is a school, just know that this large area is a manor of a big rich man. When the two arrived at the door, a young woman with white hair and chocolate skin came out and politely said to them, My name is Aura Monroe, nicknamed Storm Girl. The professor has sensed your arrival, let me greet you, please come in. Quote. Seeing the real-life version of the Storm Girl, Yi-hai couldn't help but look a few more times. This girl is indeed a good thing, but Yi-hai knows that this woman looks young on the surface. In fact, she is not too young, it is estimated to be 40 to 50, it's all old. The X gene has the effect of delaying aging, and most of the mutants live longer than ordinary people. Thank you, Miss Monroe. My name is Yi-hai. I am a scientist. This is my girlfriend, Gwen Stacy. Yi-hai introduced herself, and followed the Storm Girl into the school. As soon as she entered the school, Yi-hai felt that there was a spiritual energy over the school. This should be the spiritual ability of Professor X. He protected the school from ordinary people. Ordinary people find it here and modify their memories. What remains in the memories is just a deserted manor. The school was originally the manor of the X family, so there are idyllic scenery everywhere in it, with greenery and beautiful scenery. How young and small students are running around in the open space of the square, and some even use their abilities without fear to play with each other. Gwen lamented. It's really a paradise here. The Storm Woman laughed. You're right, Miss Gwen, the professor has always had a desire to provide mutants with a safe harbor and an environment in which they can live in peace. I think the professor has done it now. Gwen laughed. Storm Woman shook her head and said, I'm just trying. Yi-hai noticed that on the other hand, this school is very large, and there are a lot of students in it. There are a lot more students than those shown in the movies. There are about 40 or 50 students playing in the square alone. He couldn't help asking, Miss Monroe, how many people are there in your school? The Storm Girl glanced at him and said vaguely, there are about 300 or 400 people. Are they all mutants? Yes. What about their abilities? They're all great. Very ordinary. The three walked into a building that looked a lot like an ancient castle. There was a bald head waiting in a wheelchair. His features looked about 50 years old. He had healthy brown skin and eyes full of wisdom and vicissitudes. He saw Yi-hai and said with a strong magnetic voice, Welcome Mr. Yi and Miss Stacy. His etiquette is very typical of Western classical aristocracy, and his voice is slow and full of charm. Yi-hai smiled. Professor, we finally met. Your school is good. Thank you, please come with me. The professor smiled slightly, and took them into a living room. The Storm Woman sent tea. Yi-hai was sitting calmly, but Gwen beside him was very nervous. She knew from Yi-hai that the professor had powerful telepathy in front of her. She was afraid that her thinking would be read by Professor X, then Professor X will know the secrets of the two of them, knowing that the two of them were not mutants, but changed through genetic fusion, and they regret to follow Yi-hai. In fact, Yi-hai asked Gwen to come together to prevent Professor X from reading Gwen's thoughts. Because he knew the professor was a good old man, and for his friends, he would not read the other party's thinking under normal circumstances, so he brought him Gwen to let the professor recognize her and become a friend of the professor. On the contrary, it is useless to stay away from the professor. Even if the professor does not use the amplification instrument thinking, he can cover the whole of New York City. It is useless to hide. Instead, it will provoke the professor's curiosity and expose the secret of the two. Yi-hai's behavior is gambling. Professor X will not read Gwen's thinking. Looking at the professor's performance now, it is obviously a bet, otherwise the old man would not look so indifferent. The professor said, Drive Yi, what do you think of mutants? Yi-hai did not hesitate. The mutants are in a dangerous situation now. Anti-mutant demonstrations are taking place all over the world. Ordinary people are full of fear and prejudice against mutants, and some of them are ordinary people. It is also full of vigilance and even hatred, which has exacerbated the contradictions between the two races. I think now is the time when our mutant race is in a very dangerous situation. The professor smiled and nodded. You're right, Dr. Yi, do you have any good solutions? Yi-hai looked at the professor with a smile, and said, I'm just an inexperienced young man. Does the professor ask me this question to see me too? Professor Han smiled. Although you are young, your wisdom is the best in the world. I have lived for so long. I have never seen anyone so smart as you. Of course, you can only show your intelligence now, scientifically, but I still hope that I can find a solution to the two races of mutants and ordinary people. Quote, Professor is the pioneer of this road. Haven't you come to a road for so many years? Yi-hai avoided but answered. The professor's eyes appeared confused, as if in a memory, slowly said, I and Eric, and other brothers and sisters have explored together, I have searched. At first Eric was in my persuasion. trusting humanity together, full of goodwill towards humanity, showing their ability in front of humanity, and cooperating with the human government, but the distrust between the two sides has finally taken Eric to the extreme. The professor looked at Yi-hai with a smile and said mildly, "In fact, Eric and I have embarked on two extremes. Eric has taken the road of revolution, and I have always compromised with the human government, hoping to pass peaceful means to integrate mutants into human society." Quote. Gwen nodded, "I think the professor is doing the right thing. Although our mutants have superpowers, we are still essentially humans and should not be separated from each other. Yes, Miss Stacy is both intelligent and kind, but many humans also know that mutants are also humans, but they still treat mutants as aliens. Do you know why?" Gwen shook his head suddenly. "Yi-hai knows more about this. He said, mutants have superpowers to do evil. On the other hand, many mutants are weird. They have no human form and are completely like monsters. It's hard to say other people. Even their parents will be disgusted. This is a big factor in human rejection of mutants." Quote. Yes, Dr. Yi is right. These weird mutants are the poorest mutants in the world. Their strange shapes are abandoned by human beings. They have no friends, no parents, and can only hide in the sewers or old forests in the mountains. And more died of human brutality. The professor said slowly, his eyes full of sorrow. Yi-hai looked at Professor X, and suddenly said, "Does the professor say that I want to solve this problem? It seems that the professor already knows my research on mutants. How much do you know about us?" The professor smiled kindly. "Many. I know that the two were not mutants, but through perfect genetic fusion, they became powerful mutants. Dr. Yi, your creative ability will change the whole world, and you will go to the next one." "What kind of way?" Quote. Gwen looked at the professor in shock and was very nervous. Yi-hai looked at the professor with surprise, and said, "I still can't hide the professor. Is the professor worried that I will make a mess? It seems that the good old man will also peep at the secrets of others." No, it should be said that his ability is to peep at the thoughts of others. Even if he does not peek at Gwen's thoughts, he can get some clues from his colleagues' minds and then speculate. The professor shook his head and said, "The more capable a person is, it will destroy the world and create the world. Professor Yi is a kind-hearted person, and I can feel that." Yi-hai breathed a sigh of relief. Since the other party is not hostile to himself, cooperate with the other party. Professor wants my research ability to change mutants. This is no problem. I am also one of the mutants now. I have an obligation to help my brothers and sisters, but I have a condition. Yi-hai smiled. The professor said, "I want the blood of your X-Men." Just now he thought quickly. The other party knew nothing about his secret, because he was Professor X, knew what his ability meant, and he wouldn't say it in a random way. So he wanted to use this ability in exchange for the X-Men's blood to test the other party. If the other party agreed, he would cooperate with the other party and then quickly strengthen his ability. If he didn't agree, then I'm sorry, and there is nothing to say in the future. Yes, the professor seemed well prepared, and soon agreed. Yi-hai breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. At the same time, he was very excited. The X-Men's abilities are many and very powerful, especially the abilities of Professor X and Chin. If they can get the abilities of two people, the world can basically go sideways. The professor said, "Drive Yi, I think that you can do mutant research in the future. You can come to our college and stop working in Osborne Industry, where it has been completely targeted by S.H.I.E.L.D. If your research discovered by S.H.I.E.L.D. can bring disaster to you and even mutant groups." Quote. Yi-hai froze slightly and finally nodded, "Okay. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s monitoring of Osborne has been known for a long time, so his research has been very cautious these days, but the so-called often walk by the river is not wet shoes, his hacking ability is strong, the other party is conscious go and look for some problems." Originally, after considering earning some money from Norman, he started his own secret laboratory. Now that the professor invites him, he decides to work here temporarily for a while, but he has a concern that this school is often patronized by the magic woman, and it is difficult for her to discover the secret. "But I can only do experiments on my own. Others cannot approach me." Of course, Yi-hai talked with Professor X about cooperation with each other. Yi-hai used the college's laboratory and materials to help make medicines that change the quality of the human body. He also became a teacher and consultant of the college. After the discussion, Yi Hai asked, Professor, as a professional mutant college, you should have the ability test. I want to do an ability test. Okay. The professor didn't say long, and walked in a red-haired young woman. The woman had a strong body, a red dress and a pair of glasses. Her name is Chin Gray, nicknamed Phoenix Girl. The professor introduced, Chin, you take Dr. Yi and Miss Stacy to do the ability test. Okay, Professor. Chin's face had a clear expression, and turned to walk outside the door. The two were led by Chin into a secret room, all of which were made of steel and had laboratories. The three walked into a huge laboratory with a lot of medical equipment and other testers. Take off your clothes, Chin said coldly. Gwen froze, showing an embarrassed look. Yi Hai blinked at her, quickly took off his outerwear and trousers, wearing only a pair of underpants. Chin couldn't help but brighten her eyes, because Yi Hai's figure was very perfect, her strong muscles were not very prominent, but she was full of male masculinity. Gwen couldn't help but stare. Jin teased, Miss Stacy, haven't you seen enough as your boyfriend? Oh, Gwen Chow, flushed, at a loss, Chin reminded, please take off your coat, and lie down on that work table. Okay. Gwen took off his clothes helplessly, leaving only the underwear lying on the workbench. Chin placed some instruments on the two of them, then fluctuated, and different data was displayed on the display. Both of them have good physical data. Looking at the cellular response, you two should have just awakened the power recently. The power level should not be very high, Chin concluded. Just waking up requires a process of adapting to superpowers, so Chin said that the two of them will not be high. Yi Hai pouted with a smile. That's not necessarily true, maybe we two are geniuses. Well, Mr. Genius Mutant, what is your ability? Chin asked coldly. Regeneration ability, flight, great power, super 5 senses, and danger prediction ability. Yi Haidao. Chin chuckled. A lot of abilities, but people with more abilities have lower ranks. Dr. Yi, do you know why? Yi Hai shrugged. I know what you mean. Human cells have a limited ability to tolerate. The more ability, the slower the ability to grow. Yes, it seems that Dr. Yi is very researched on the ability of mutants. Chin nodded. Generally, you have so many abilities. Generally speaking, growth slows down. Not to mention, the level is up to 3 or more, and rarely can 4 levels. Quote. Yi Hai smiled and said, Level 4. There are so many mutants in the world, and their abilities are single, but how many can they reach level 4? Chin's beautiful face was a little stunned, and a little dumbfounded. You said the same thing. In fact, Yi Hai knew that this restriction was useless to him. As long as his brain was scientific enough, he could continue to grow, that is, his level could continue to grow, and there would be no such restriction. What is Miss Stacy's ability? Chin looked at Gwen. Gwen sullenly said, ability to regenerate. She was a little jealous of this woman who was stronger and more beautiful than her, and her boyfriend seemed to be very interested in her again, so she was upset and ignored her. Chin has lived so many years. When she looked at her expression, she knew what she wanted without knowing the mind, and smiled slightly. Then we will test your ability now. A few minutes later, Chin was surprised. The ability of the two of you turned out to be 3rd level. My God, what is going on, completely subverting our previous research theory on mutants. Miss Chin, the two of us are special, you don't have to worry about these, Gwen said slightly proudly. Yi Hai shrugged amusedly and said, yes, the two of us are special. The professor knows this question, but Miss Chin, you better not use mind reading, otherwise we will be unhappy, and the professor will not allow you to do so. If you want to know why, you can find a professor if he is willing to tell you. Quote. Seeing the mysterious appearance of the two, Chin couldn't help using mind reading, but remembered the school system and gave up this plan. Okay, I'll ask the professor. Chin helplessly, what other tests do the two need? Yi Hai smiled. I want to test my strength. Okay. Chin took Yi Hai to a huge instrument and said, this machine can test 100 tons of force. Dr. Yi, how many tons of force do you need to test? 10 tons. Okay. Chin entered the 10-ton data, and then a lever of the machine sank down, blasting a stream of air. Let's get started, Chin said. Yi Hai Sheng stretched out his left hand and lifted it easily with one hand. He was suddenly surprised in his heart. This is how it happened. My strength seems to have increased a lot. 20 tons. Soon, He lifted up again easily. 30 tons. Still so. 40 tons. 50 tons. In the end, Yi Hai's limit was 56 tons. Qin was so stunned. Yi Hai Song relaxed his shoulders and asked in his heart, "System, what's my strength now?" Start testing. The quality inspection system is on. The host gets regenerating genes, and the cells gain. The first level brain domain strength is about 1 ton, the second level brain domain strength is about 5 tons, the third level brain domain strength is about 50 tons, and the fourth level brain domain strength is 500. About 5 tons, the strength of the fifth level brain domain is about 5,000 tons, and the strength of the sixth level brain domain is about 50,000 tons. Finally, the mutant human cells of the host are not strong enough to open the seventh level brain domain to increase strength. Quote, "So it is," Yi Hai knew, "a regenerating gene actually increased my power by 5 times. After the tests were completed, the two left Yi Mutant Academy and returned to their homes. Gwen came home. It was late, and her mother stood in the living room looking at her daughter and laughed. "Gwen, you have been home late, are you dating? Do you have a boyfriend?" Quote. Gwen froze a little, and at last felt a little embarrassed. "Yes, mother." "How long have you been together?" the mother asked with interest. Gwen thought about it and said, "It's been about a month." "It's been a month." The mother was surprised. She didn't expect her daughter to have been with her boyfriend for a month, and it was her daughter's first love, but she knew nothing about herself as a mother. "So, do you guys have that?" Quote. That. Gwen's face suddenly froze. She remembered her Chu girl constitution, she should be a Chu girl, and smiled. "Mom, I'm still a Chu girl." My mother was relieved and satisfied. "It seems that you have met a gentleman, Gwen. I have a suggestion. If you are free, how about you bring your gentleman to your home for dinner? Your parents would like to see you very much. Meet him." "Okay, no problem." Gwen was so confident in his boyfriend that he promised. 3 days later, Yi Hai's studio. Ding. The quality inspection system is open. The host research genetic medicine and Norman Osborn's body gene fusion is 87%, ready to use. Yi Hai looked at the green medicament in front of him. This is the result of his 3-day research. In the last 3 days, he has been carefully researching in the Osborn Industrial Building, because Osborn already has data on Norman genes. It is very complete, eliminating the need for Yi Hai's own testing and sorting. He only needs to use gene fusion technology to develop a genetic agent, so it doesn't take much time. It only took 3 days to get the agent. 87%. It is enough to use. Anyway, it can cure Norman Osborn's disease. Yi Hai has no interest in further improving the medicine. Yi Hai opened Norman's mobile phone, and after the other party linked, Shen said, "Drive Yi, is there anything you can do for me?" His voice sounded weak, and it seemed that the disease had afflicted his body with increasing severity. Yi Hai smiled. "Mr. Norman, here's the good news. I have successfully researched the genetic medicine for your genetic diseases." The other person was obviously short of breath, and he gave a short breath, then said weakly, "Is that so fast? Didn't you say it would take a month?" There was some distrust in his tone. This gene has troubled his family for many years. Now he has a solution so easily that he couldn't believe and accept it for a while. Yi Hazy said, "It seems that your suspicion is very serious. Osborn's central computer has been simulated and tested. Your genetic disease can be completely solved. If you don't believe it, I have nothing to say. You can only wait to die." Quote. "Okay, Dr. Yi, I believe what you said," Norman said helplessly. There is no better way for him now. His dependent scientists are a group of waste. Until now, he still has no way to take those lizard potions. Look at this young man. The trick is as if there are any scientific problems. It's easy to solve in front of you. Drive Yi, my housekeeper will come to pick you up. Please keep your potions safe, Norman ordered. No problem, Yi Hai also commanded. You also prepare your contract and lawyer. Norman grinned. Of course, if your potion works, I will be willing to pay the price. After hanging up the phone, Yi Hai waited for a long time, and Norman's car came downstairs to Osborn. It was a lengthened luxury car. Yi Hai walked over and a 17-year-old young man walked down the car. The young man had brown hair and was very handsome. He always had a smile on his face. Going up has a good temper. The young man saw Yi Hai and said, Hello Dr. Yi, my name is Harry Osborn, and I am the son of Norman Osborn. Hello, little boss. Yi-Hi grinned and patted his shoulder familiarly, saying, today is a great day for your Osborn family, boy, your destiny will change from today. Harry knew what he meant, and nodded and smiled. Drive Yi, I hope your potion really works for us. Of course it works. Yi-Hi was confident. Yi-Hi got into the car started to start, and then started to move swiftly. I heard Peter say that Gwen is now Dr. Yi's girlfriend. Harry sitting beside him said inadvertently. Yi-Hi smiled. Yes, we are like-minded, so they are a natural pair. So. He patted Harry on the shoulder again, and said, so, let's get rid of unrealistic thoughts. Gwen can't look after you. Harry was a little unconvinced. Is it? I think with my family and my talents, I can bring a better life to Gwen. Talent? Yi-Hi laughed and scorned. How many scientists' brains do you have, and you can't even match your father, let alone me, and money, do you think people like me will lack money? You. When face-to-face was faced, Harry's good education was still unbearable, and he exclaimed, I think you're just a self-exaggerated man. Gwen would look at you like this. Yi-Hi raised the box in his hand, which contained the genetic medicine. He said, I just can cure your family's genetic disease. I don't know how many times better than you, kid. Who knows if it will work, Harry said with a quiver. You don't believe it? Yi-Hi challenged. This is all right, how about we make a bet? Yi-Hi's arrogant tone annoyed Harry, and he showed no weakness. What bet? I heal your genetic disease, you will be my little brother. Yi-Hi smiled. What if the cure isn't good? Harry looked directly at Yi-Hi. How about you leave Gwen? No problem. Yi-Hi laughed. You just wait to be my little brother. The car suddenly stopped and the steward said, Master, Dr. Yi, you have arrived. As the steward stepped out of the car, he opened the back door. Please, Dr. Yi. Harry was polite. Norman, as a super-rich, lived a very large house. Yi-Hi walked into a castle-like luxury house and looked at it casually. I felt that the villa was very luxurious, but obviously there was no one from Professor X. There are details. Yi-Hi followed Harry's walk to the villa, and soon went upstairs to Norman's bedroom. Norman's bedroom was large. There were a few strong men standing in it, with muscular muscles, huge body, and a strong murderous spirit, which seemed to be iron soldiers who had been on the battlefield. The men didn't seem to see Yi-Hi, but stood blankly, like statues. Norman was lying on his bed, his face was pale and thin, and he looked like a patient with advanced cancer. Yi-Hi walked to Norman, looked around for a while, and said, Chairman, it looks like your situation is terrible. Yes, Dr. Yi. Norman looked up weakly and said weakly, I hope your potion will bring me back to life. Of course you can, rest assured. Yi-Hi flattened the password box in his hand, opened it, and took out a bottle of medicine and a syringe. At this time the housekeeper said, Drive Yi, can you let me? Of course you can. Yi-Hi gave the medicine and syringe to the housekeeper. The housekeeper filled the syringe, looked at the green liquid inside the body, turned to look at Yi-Hi. His eyes were full of seriousness and coldness. Drive Yi, this medicine is really it works. You need to know that if something goes wrong, you will pay a heavy price. Quote. Okay. Norman waved his hand slightly, weakly, I will give it a try whether it succeeds or not. If I fail, don't bury my body, I can research my body again. I hope to use my body as a hope for Harry. Quote. Harry trembled, shivered, holding back tears to keep himself from falling. Yi-Hi sighed, it is really the hearts of parents all over the world. Norman's hazy eyes looked at Yi-Hi and continued, if I die, Dr. Yi, I won't bother you, and I will hand over 5% of Osborn to you, but you need to promise me a condition. Quote. What conditions? Yi-Hi looked down at Norman. Help Harry solve his genetic disease. Norman looked at him indefinitely. You just believe me. Yi-Hi looked at him strangely. You are the most talented scientist I have seen in years. You have the jealous creative ability. I believe you have this ability and you have to have Harry's disease, as long as you give enough time. Norman still looked Yi-Hi, so, I need your promise. Yi-Hi nodded solemnly. I promised, but I am very confident in my potion. Yi-Hi is helpless, can't these guys have a little confidence in me? It is so speechless to do such a life and death parting. Norman breathed a sigh of relief, and seemed to have explained all the problems before he said to the housekeeper, "Butler, let's get started." "Yes." The housekeeper nodded slightly, but the hands holding the syringe were awkward, trembling and shaking. After a long time, he approached Norman's arm and inserted the syringe into Norman's. In the meridian. Everyone looked at the green medicament slowly entering Norman's old body. They all had complex faces, full of expectations and worries. Only Yi-Hai was calm, full of confidence in his medicaments, and a systematic guarantee. Suddenly, Norman snorted slightly, his body curled up fiercely, grabbing his hands with his hands, and staying on the sheets. It seemed to be suffering great pain. The crowd was shocked, and looked at Yi-Hai with a poor expression. Yi-Hai shrugged, explaining, "After the effect of the medicament, it will be a bit painful, but I have slowed down the effect of the drug to take care of the chairman's body, so the pain is not very strong, and Mr. Norman should be able to bear it." The drug effect has slowed down, but it still looks very painful to see Norman's appearance. Everyone can't help but worry about this medicine, but most of the people present are more or less aware of gene therapy and know that gene recombination will suffer a lot of pain. This is normal. Norman's pain continued. His pain was very low and weak, like the wailing of a dying patient, full of nostalgia and resentment to the world. With the passage of time, his pain became louder. It started to become stronger and no longer looked weak. The steward's eyes brightened and he blurted out, "It seems that this potion works, and Mr. Norman's body is getting better." There are advanced medical equipment in the bedroom, but the housekeeper is very proficient in this area. After he manipulated these equipments, the current status data of Norman appeared on the screen. The data is starting to mutate in a healthy direction. It seems Mr. Norman is expected to be successful in the treatment. The housekeeper cried in surprise. Harry was instantly excited and said, "Dad, how are you feeling now?" "Child, don't worry." Norman put up with severe pain. A smile on his twisted face barely said, "It seems that I can hope to survive." After more than an hour, the pain began to weaken. Norman shook his body, dropped his equipment, and jumped out of bed smartly, acting like a young man with agility. Harry looked at his father in surprise and asked, "Dad, it looks like you're fine." "Yes, I'm fine. I haven't felt this way for many years. I feel like I've become a 20-something guy." Norman sighed. Harry was very pleased to see his father recover, but the housekeeper reminded him, "Sir, I think we still ask our professional physician to help you take a look." Norman waved a shaw body and nodded. "Okay, this must be done." The housekeeper called the family doctor. It didn't take long for these doctors and nurses to come over and see Norman seemed healthy. He couldn't help but be shocked. "Mr. Norman, your body. Your research was successful." "Yes, doctor, but I need your expertise to help me check my body," Norman said in an unquestionable tone. Of course, the doctors started to act, and they were busy for more than an hour before they stopped. The meeting reported, "Mr. Norman, from a medical point of view, your health is not as good as it is now, and you can be in your 20s. The boys are comparable, but whether the genetic problem has been fully repaired is not my specialty." Quote. Norman waved his hand. "This doesn't require you to worry, my company has many such scientists." He looked at Yi-Hai, who was sitting beside him, and said, "Let's all go down. Housekeeper, call the lawyer." "Okay, sir." Not long after the crowd left, the lawyer came over. The lawyer saw Norman and said, "Mr. Norman, congratulations on your recovery." Norman haha laughed. "Thanks to Dr. Yi." The lawyer's eyes turned to Yi-Hai, complimenting, "This is Dr. Yi. It is incredible, Dr. Yi, you are so young." Yi-Hai only smiled slightly. Norman laughed. "Yes, he is a very talented young man, very intelligent and creative with biology. I can even say that he will become the greatest scientist of this century." Yi-Hai smiled. "The chairman is polite, let's start. It seems you can't wait." Norman smiled and waved at the lawyer. The lawyer took out the share transfer book that had been prepared a long time ago, and Yi-Hai took it, but after reading it in a few seconds, the lawyer kindly reminded, "Drive Yi, this is a matter of your property, I advise you to be able to take a closer look and think carefully." Quote. Yi-Hai smiled. "I have finished watching it carefully." "You finished watching?" Both the lawyer and Norman looked at Yi-Hai like the monster's eyes. Yi-Hai nodded and said, "My thinking ability is much faster than ordinary people. I can read a book with hundreds of thousands of words in a few minutes." This is not difficult for me. Mr. Norman, I have such a high level efficiency, you can complete your genetic medicine in just 3 days, I have such ability, you should be grateful that Osborne Industry owns a shareholder like me. So, what is the best condition for you to take out on contract? Quote. The lawyer was shocked and looked at Norman. Norman did let him draw up several contracts with different conditions. Norman gazed at Yi Hai for a while, and finally smiled. Okay, Dr. Yi, you are shocking me again. The lawyer came up with another contract, and Yi Hai took a quick look again and said with satisfaction, this contract is what I am willing to accept. I think other shareholders have agreed. Of course, they never disagreed with me. Norman's tone was full of domineering and self-confidence. Although I was a dying chairman at the time, I was still the supreme ruler of Osborne. This is to show Yi Hai his prestige, but also hinted Yi a little bit, so that he should not be arrogant. Although he is now a shareholder, he still has to listen to him. Yi Hai didn't take his demonstration seriously. In his eyes, it was like a wild dog barking at the tiger. How could the tiger be afraid, even though the wild dog was rich? That being the case, I signed up. Yi Hai shrugged. Don't get a date, I think it should be the key point. The lawyer suggested. Yi Hai shook his head. I hope to be low-key. I am a scientist and don't like publicity. This kind of gimmicky thing is a complete waste of my time. A smile appeared on Norman's face. This scientist who only studies and ignores interpersonal relationships is his favorite, because such people are generally not interested in management and business, which means that Yi Hai will not come with him in the future. Seize power. He nodded and said, then do as Dr. Yi said. After Yi Hai signed the contract, Norman's professional lawyers will go through some other procedures. Yi Hai believes that Norman will not fiddle with this aspect. Since he is willing to hand over the shares, he will definitely not make trouble at this point. Something happened, otherwise he would lose his reputation. After finishing it, he walked out of Norman's bedroom, came to the living room, patted Harry on the shoulder, and said, Harry Osborne, you are my younger brother now, and call a big brother to listen. Quote. Brother, Harry said helplessly, are you going to worship me? Are we Americans unhappy? Are you calling me boss? Yi Hai laughed. Drive Yi, I want to join your lab. You are really terrific. I want to study by your side, can you? Dr. Yi. Harry looked at Yi Hai frantically, eyes full of hope. Harry, you are not qualified enough. You are just a high school student. Come after you graduate from college. Yi Hai refused politely. Harry reluctantly said, but Gwen is also a high school student, isn't she still your assistant? Yi Hai smiled and said, first, Gwen is very beautiful, and she is my girlfriend. Working with her is a very pleasant thing. Second, Gwen is brilliant. She is not a vase. She has no worse knowledge than university graduates, and under my guidance, I think she is no worse than graduate students. What about you, Harry, what do you have? Quote. Harry was despised in person, making him very angry, but helpless. This hurt him a lot. I will exceed Gwen, no, I must exceed you. Cut. Ignorance. Yi Hai said a word and walked straight out of Osborne House. For this ignorant middle-aged youth, and the main thing is the person who has an attempt to his girlfriend Gwen, he will not give good color. Harry looked at Yi Hai's back, and clenched his hands in anger, his body trembled and shivered. At this moment, a large generous hand was placed on his shoulder, and he turned and was ashamed. Daddy. You are really ignorant, and your direction is wrong. You are not as talented in scientific research as Dr. Yi. Norman attacked Harry unceremoniously, and no other person was his own son and had a pleasant appearance. He has always been so serious, or severe. Harry had long been accustomed to these habits, and he was powerless. Then what should I do? You should put your interest in personnel and business. This is your future work. You should recognize your identity and status. Your scientific research can be a hobby or only a hobby. But I don't like doing business, Dad. Harry insisted. You have to like doing business, because you are my Norman's son. Norman stared coldly at Harry, his voice still unquestionable. Yi Hai returned to the Osborne Industrial Building, walked to a corridor, and the walls were covered with many videos. A video was playing in the video. A fire broke out in a residential building. A man in a red uniform was in the building. Going up the eaves and walking the wall, rescued the refugees one by one, and acted quickly, like a spider. Many people gathered on the video, Many people admired and admired. One middle-aged black man was excited and said, "Spider-Man, he's great, isn't he?" "Yes, he's great," someone agreed casually. "He's a good man, isn't he?" The black man still said cheerfully, with a piety and impulse in his tone that seemed to want everyone to agree with him. "Yes, he's a good guy." The people who responded to him were indifferent people, and they didn't care what Spider-Man did. "Don't gather here, you're not going to work yet." A middle-aged man who seemed to be a manager came over and shouted at the crowd. Everyone immediately hurried away, leaving only Yi-Hai alone. The governor stared angrily and said, "Did you not hear me?" After walking into Yi-Hai's face, he suddenly hesitated, and immediately smiled. "It was Dr. Yi, Dr. Yi, hello, I didn't know it was you just now." "It's okay, I should go now." Yi-Hai smiled and walked to the elevator. The elevator was slowly closing. People inside saw Yi-Hai and quickly opened the elevator. Yi-Hai walked in with a smile, nodded and thanked the people inside. This man was the middle-aged black man in the corridor just now. This black man had some thin hair. With a pair of glasses, he was somewhat restrained when he saw Yi-Hai. After a while, he gathered his courage and said, "Drive Yi, how many floors are you going to?" Most of Osborn's employees know this young scientist, because Osborn has a website with introductions and photos about Yi-Hai. Yi-Hai's outstanding contributions have become Osborn's stars and employees. The object of worship, especially those researchers who admire Yi-Hai very much. "The 63rd floor, Yi-Hai said casually. "Today he is in a good mood. Whoever gets the 5% stake in Osborn will be in a good mood, but it has a market value of tens of billions of dollars." The black man said to the video on the wall, 63 floor. A beautiful girl in the video said to him, "Thank you." This girl is the intelligence of the Osborn building and controls much of the Osborn building's infrastructure. "Thank you." Yi-Hai nodded politely. The black man touched his hair unnaturally and introduced himself. "My name is Max Vidiran." "Max Verdillan, isn't this the name of Dianguang people?" Yi-Hai suddenly refreshed and turned to look at the black man carefully. Basically it can be determined that this black man should be the electro-optic person, but it is a pity that he has not become an electro-optic person. This poor middle-aged black uncle has been eyed by Yi-Hai, and Yi-Hai is looking forward to the day when he becomes an electric man. "My name is Yi-Hai, I'm glad to meet you." "I'm glad to meet you, Dr. Yi." Yi-Hai watched a card in his hand and laughed, "Today is your birthday." "Yes." Max patted the card on the palm and said, "This is the card sent to me by the company's personnel department. This is the company's goodness, Lee. Many colleagues will attend my birthday party at that time. See, I would have invited you to Mao, Xian, Wen, and Net, but the list has been finalized." "Oh, it's okay, I think it must be lively." Yi-Hai just smiled, knowing that he was just polite and didn't really want to invite him. After all, they were not familiar. The scene of Spider-Man saving people still exploded on the screen. He still sprinted the hot building, jumping into the sea of fire again and again to save people. Yi-Hai showed his admiration and said, "Spider-Man is really an enthusiastic person. It is really rare. Most of the people in this world who have suddenly got superpowers have gone astray or are still disguised as ordinary people. Spider-Man is different. He will think for others and help others with his superpowers." Quote. "Yes, this kind of attention must be great." Max looked enviously at the screen. "Spider-Man saved my life. He said he needs me, and I think I should be a useful person, although I'm insignificant now." Quote. "This is a person tortured by life without corners and self-confidence. He doesn't have much sense of existence in his life. He is so humble and ordinary, but he still has unwillingness in his heart. People are attracting attention, and become useful to society and their families, respected by the society and worshipped by their families. Yi-Hai can understand this feeling and desire, because he used to be a member of the billions of silks, but he cannot do anything about it. This kind of social problem cannot be solved even if he has a superhuman mind." At this time, the 63rd floor arrived, and the door of the elevator opened. Yi-Hai said to the black man, "Oh, I'm here, bye, Max. See you next time." Yi-Hai walked out of the elevator door closed again, and Max stood idly in the elevator, burst into tears with excitement. "He remembers my name, and he said he looks forward to seeing him next time." In Max's view, Yi-Hai is Osborn's big man, because Yi-Hai is one of Osborn's chief scientists, and his status is only after Osmond's custodian Norman Osborn. Max, who has no sense of being, was remembered by such a character, and he spoke very politely, which made him feel extremely satisfied and glorified. Yi-Hai came to the laboratory, opened the back door of the central computer, and ordered the central computer, Xuanvi, help me keep an eye on the employee named Max Veteran. Zhan Nu is a hidden intelligence he set in the central computer, a young female role. Yes, Zhan Nu's cold voice sounded and began to execute Yi-Hai's order meticulously. Yi-Hai knew that Xuanvi would strictly execute her orders, and she focused on other research. Gwen came over and asked, Yi, what did Big Boss tell you to do in the past? You forgot my agreement with Norman. Yi-Hai laughed. Gwen was pleasantly surprised. Have you developed a medicine to treat Norman's genetic disease? Yes, I have given the medicine to Mr. Norman, and his illness is already well. Yi-Hai looked at Gwen with a smile, and was slightly proud. Then according to the agreement, he has transferred 5% of the shares to me. Quote. Gwen exclaimed. Oh my God, Osborn's 5% stake, Mr. Osborn is really generous. You should say your boyfriend's ability is too powerful, worth $50 billion US. Yi-Hai smiled. Well, you're amazing. Gwen flattered gently. Of course I am great, no matter what. Yi-Hai said in a pun, and blinked at Gwen. Gwen understood what he meant, pouted a smile, looked at his computer data, and asked, Scientist, what are you doing now? Yi-Hai grinned. Of course, it is a crucial subject for us. Gwen was suddenly shocked and excited. What's the subject to study, what is it? Gwen, what would you say is an important subject for both of us? Yi-Hai winked at her, and Gwen flushed. She knew what Yi-Hai was studying. He is studying her Chu girl's constitution. Master, Max is out of danger now. Suddenly, the voice of Zhan Nu sounded, the monitor screen flashed, and the black scene appeared. Max was not very optimistic. He grabbed the high-voltage cable with both hands, but the high-voltage cable leaked firmly and caught him. He twitched and fell into the biocell below. The bio battery is a pond with a lot of mutant electric eels. The electric eel immediately rushed up when he saw him. He kept biting and shocking him. During the flashing of light, Max kept convulsing and screaming. Oh my gosh! Gwen covered her mouth in horror, but Yi-Hai stared at the screen with a gaze, knowing that Dianguangren was about to appear. This mutation process fascinated him. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.